the city with it. But anyway, so I'm wondering what those legal documents, did it say forever, or did it say for so many years? I mean, that was a long time ago, 60 years ago. So it's just curious as to, what did those final documents that they go to court? And I was too young then to remember, but I remember that's always been the story. They hired an attorney and thought, and that's how a lot of those people did. Saddlewood Farms, that's down, well, we call it Knott Road. I don't know what it's called. Where is that? I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong with my throat.
There's an actual street called Saddlewood, and it's right kind of across from
Yeah, that's where I thought it was. Okay, so that used to be kind of Knott Road. That's what we always.
There is no road.
Oh, there is. So it's right around in that area.
Yeah.
Though.
That's how we found out.
Good morning, everyone. If you can all take their seats, I would appreciate it. Today is Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. It is 9:01 a.m. We're sitting here in council chambers for the hearing examiner hearings on this date. I'm calling the hearings to order. Before we start the hearings, I have a few preliminary comments to make. First, I would like to introduce the process that is followed by the City of Cape Coral. It's a little bit different than the process followed in other jurisdictions. First, the clerk will read the introduction of the case, and then she will swear in anyone who is testifying. City staff goes next, and they will testify as to compliance with the public notice requirements. If the public notice requirements have not been met, the hearing will not go forward because the due process requirements will not be met. However, if the public notice requirements have been met, then we go forward with the case in chief. The applicant goes first and is required to present an entire case. City staff goes second and presents their case. Public comment is next. If you are here for public comment, I have a few things to advise you of. First, all public comment must be under oath. That means no testimony will be accepted from your seat. We have a podium over there near the doors. We also have a podium here. I would request that if you're a member of the public and you wish to speak, that you utilize the podium over there next to the doors, for your safety and health reasons. It has the same video and audio capacity as the podium that is in the center of the room. If you are here for public comment, please make sure your comments are comprehensive, because once public comment is closed, it will not be reopened. This means that after the closure of public comment, if there are further things that are said or further testimony provided by either city staff or the applicant, you will not have an additional opportunity to comment. So I would ask you, please don't, sometimes we have people that like to share thoughts from their seat after public comment is closed. I would ask you out of courtesy to everyone in the room not to do that. As I've already mentioned, public comment, once it's closed, it will not be reopened. The next step in the process is the applicant will respond to questions or make any final comments as appropriate. Staff will do the same, and then the hearing will be concluded. If you have a cell phone with you today, please turn it off or silence it. And if you can, take any cell phone conversations outside the room. The microphones in this room are fairly sensitive, and you certainly don't want any private conversations with your dry cleaner or some third party to be recorded. However, if they are recorded, they at that time become public comment and therefore become part of the public record. If you wish to have private conversations, the same thing applies. If possible, I would suggest that you either move to a far corner of the room or go outside the room for exactly the same purpose. If your private conversations are recorded, they become part of the public record, are available to anyone who wishes to listen to them. Anyone who provides testimony other than the applicant, the applicant's team, and staff is requested to fill out a public participation card. The function of that card is so we can spell your name correctly for the record, and more importantly, if you wish a copy of the recommendation that is to be made today, or to be made regarding these cases, I should say, please do provide your email address or your mailing address, but be aware of the fact that if you provide either one of those at that time, they become public record and available to anyone who wishes to get your email address. So with those preliminary comments, I do want to start the hearings, and out of courtesy to our public safety staff who will be testifying in one of our cases today, We are reordering the order of the hearings today, and what that means is that the 801 Larch Road hearing, which is a zoning hearing, will go first, because we do have police and fire testimony regarding that, and we like to get our police and fire folks back out to whatever they need to be doing instead of sitting in zoning hearings. So that will go first, and then the PUD case will go second, and then we will proceed from there. So with all of those comments, I'm going to ask our clerk's representative to call the first case. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner. Case 1, ZA21-0018, address 801 Larch Road, applicant Maritime Properties, Inc. and Big Marlin Properties, LLC. This petition is for rezoning of 26 properties comprising approximately plus or minus 9.94 acres of property within the city. The rezone request is privately initiated and will bring the zoning designation of the parcels into compliance with the existing commercial activity center future land use classification. In the neighborhood commercial zoning district, an applicant may develop a vertically mixed-use project with a floor area ratio of 2.0, which could yield plus or minus 865,972 square feet of non-residential uses. Additionally, the maximum 16 units per acre could be developed, yielding a maximum of 159 dwelling units. However, a more realistic development would be horizontally mixed use, yielding 135 multifamily units and plus or minus 64,947 square feet of non-residential uses. Minor to moderate impacts are identified by the police and fire department and are discussed further within the staff report. Any person giving testimony today, if you are able, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may be seated.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, Mr. White.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, Patrick White, Senior Planner in City of Cape Coral City Planning Division. At this time, I would like to acknowledge this case was duly advertised. We sent out mailings and we posted signs on the property and we advertised it within the news press in accordance with city procedures.
I will find the proper notice was given. I also want to put on the record that I did a site visit to this property. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, may we have the applicant up, please?
Good morning. For the record, Tom Slaughter, Cape Land, and I have been sworn. I have both a short PowerPoint presentation as well as a video. Do you have an interest in which order?
Whatever you feel comfortable doing is fine by me, sir. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you. All right, what I'd like to do, just briefly narrate where we're at. This is the property. About half of the property lies, we're right now about the middle of the screen is the northern property line, meaning this long linear strip directly abutting the water is not part of the development proposal or the rezoning, but the side that's wooded is. And then when we take the turn, right now we're going east. As we take a turn, going left, which would be to the south. You'll see we're coming over the lakes on Nelson.
Just for the record, Mr. Slaughter, can you identify when this drone, I'm assuming it's a drone, when this video was taken?
Yes, it was taken a couple weeks ago. One of the things I can send Patrick White is the metadata file that would allow you to be able to have a record of all those things.
But it was recently. No?
Yeah, they're probably on the file record itself that we could do after the meeting and pull it up. But as indicated, the property now to the right, that property is not in it. And again, the property line is about the center of the site going over where the power poles are. So essentially what you have in this area is just slightly under 10 acres. And as indicated to the left, that property which is cleared all the way to the road, that is not part of it. But when you then move in and you see about, again, that particular spot to kind of get an orientation of the land. Let me speed this up.
And did you take the footage, or did someone else take it?
Yes, ma'am.
You took it? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, one of the things we were actually hoping to do is to contact you before this meeting, but logistics, but just simply how to load it on, how we'd present it. And then more importantly, some of those things you don't think about in a quasi-judicial setting. If there's comments and public input, how do you provide that? In this particular case, one of the things that what we're obviously concerned about is a major development to the north, but a smaller, in some cases, unincorporated. This neighborhood has components of both City of Cape Coral residential single family, but also unincorporated Lee County residential single family. So some of the times you'll see even some of the building site design being a little bit different. So that's simply because the city has a different code than unincorporated Lee County. So one of the things that we are concerned about was to the north you have that major but undeveloped project that's going to occur. And to the south and towards the east, you have an established residential neighborhood. And you see that now on the left as we're pulling up. So one of the things we wanted to do was to get a good idea of the area and then get into issues of compatibility, compactness. How are you consistent with the comprehensive plan, in this regards? Now, one of the interesting things is you also get a perspective of the utilities from here. You could obviously see that utilities have gone in the area since a number of clear lots. But also when you get into water sewer, but also drainage, stormwater, single families, generally they use swale in a municipal system, but a project like this will be required through site development to really maintain its stormwater discharge on site. So oftentimes we think of these lakes and canals as natural outlets when in fact, through site development plan, you may in fact have to treat that before it ever hits another water body. With that, let me go right to Patrick. I'm not sure.
Glad to load it for you.
I think I got it right here.
Okay.
Well, it's not. Oh, here we go. All right, is this one you said? Yeah, that's.
Mr. White is available to help you if you need it, Mr. Slaughter. Thank you.
Come on. Why is it not?
I got you.
I'm used to a mouse and,
This thing's a little squirrely sometimes, no problem.
no, go to slide. Yeah, there we go. Oh, there we go. Already. With that, let me go more to my standard remarks. As I indicated, the applicant is Dan Reed, Big Marlin and Maritime Properties. There is a split in ownership that we've identified with the development. In going through now the site information, one of the things we tried to do is to show through the video just kind of the lay of the land. And you see, obviously, this is in an area that is now served by water and sewer. One of the things we did was we brought in all the properties that were under one ownership, and you'll see and I'll talk about this a little later, is the third lot from the bottom, which is not part of the petition. We included it primarily because under the code, it talks about that 50% plus one, that if we believe it's in the city's interest to bring that property in. From our standpoint, we attempted to bring it in several ways. We contacted the property owner through telephone calls, through emails, through mail, through certified mail, all to no avail. We simply weren't able to contact them at all. So with that, we did not include that in our application materials, but we included it as part of the file for the consideration because, like I said, the city does have the ability, city council, as they're considering a broader area, because we have seen in the past where remnant pieces have been left alone, only to have that problem get fixed later. So rather than leaving this out, we've asked that it be included in, but if it's not, I think it's the proper thing to do, but it doesn't prevent us from going forward. In going through this, one of the things we indicated is this is a remnant piece that was an enclave in it, because you could see some of the original zoning is still there, agriculture. Generally, Cape Coral had that zoning in place, but it was primarily to hold properties that were coming in, but we generally didn't do a lot of agricultural use on our lands. It has a future land use designation of commercial activity center. And we'll talk about that because oftentimes there may be situations where there may be a number of different zoning districts that may be appropriate. In this case, there's only one though, under the city's code, and I'll talk about that. We've talked about the 26 lots. And again, there is concern about as this project develops out and we go through site development plan, both water management as well as buffering, again, to the property that's to the south, which is known, but there's also an unknown component. So one of the things you have to do is get an understanding of what plans would happen to the north as well. But essentially, we're a smaller project, so I believe that that 10 acres not only can fit in, but under the neighborhood commercial, it provides a lot of opportunities that I think the city's looking for in new future development. As indicated, under the CAC, there's only one zoning district to go for, neighborhood commercial. And it does require both a mixture of uses, which we've identified in our proposal. And one of the ways we demonstrated that is, this is not a final site plan, but this concept shows essentially if there were to be a split and mixture of uses, you know, maybe 3/4 of it being a residential component, multifamily in nature, within a smaller, less intensive commercial or professional office use, naturally you would include that up front. And if that lot, which is listed as the address of 812, which is right, get my mouse over, right here, if that is not included in a future development plan, essentially the lot to the north would be the connector lot that would allow both your utilities and transportation system to basically connect the front envisioned commercial component with the rear envisioned multifamily component. In going through the city's review criteria, there's 6 standards, and I talked about them earlier. There's consistency with the comp plan, which we believe we are. We're also compatible. Under the neighborhood commercial, it will require future staff review at site development stage. The uses, again, there's only one category to choose from under the neighborhood commercial, but we believe it can be one where it'll fit in with that future growth, but also still be sensitive to those lower intensity uses, again, already established in the neighborhood. The community need, again, we've talked about the city has about mixed use and those types of flexible design. We believe that the characteristics, both in site and other architectural amenities, will be a benefit. And lastly, the adverse impacts, again, you deal with them through buffering, through other site development standards that we can do. You know, we aren't anticipating a very, you know, a real vertical project. You just don't see that even in our downtown central business area. We're just not seeing it. So you'd see kind of that mid-range 2 to 3 story, you know, is what we'd expect. Of the findings, we believe that is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The petition is consistent with our goals, objectives, and policies, that the intended mixed uses are compatible, both in terms of the planned commercial, professional, and residential. And lastly, that the city's already gone through the level of service standards. Yes, there will be impacts. It's a new development. But the impacts are such that they are very minor, or even to the point of sometimes being de minimis in nature, meaning you're able to identify what the impact is, but not go to a higher threshold of, say, a transportation analysis. Or if you have to do one, it's probably not going to be a very difficult one because it's only 10 acres in size. You know, the intensity of use simply is not there to expand it that well. With that concludes my presentation, both now as well as after the public's spoken. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them. Thank you.
Mr. Slaughter, before you leave the podium, do you wish to incorporate the staff report into your presentation today?
Yes, ma'am. If I could, I'd like to incorporate the or the client report, the client presentation, and the client video, as well as the staff report into the presentation. There are no objections or questions from the client to the staff in terms of their report.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. Mr. White, you're up, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
You want to talk about an expert witness? Madam Hearing Examiner, thank you again. For the record, Patrick White, Senior Planner in the Planning Department.
You're kind of low. I don't know if it's
Let me
you
get
or the
let
microphone.
me speak a little bit louder then.
There you go.
If you wouldn't mind, I would like to be treated as an expert witness on this case based on my previous presentations and my credentials, which are in the city clerk's office.
I will find you as an expert witness for purposes of this hearing regarding land planning issues based upon your credentials which are on file with the clerk, and also based upon your testimony regarding similar matters and other zoning hearings in the city of Cape Coral. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also like to incorporate my staff report in this presentation to the official record.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. As previously noted, this case is ZA 2118. It is April 19th, 2022. There are two pairs of owners of this assembled 26 properties, about 10 acres. They are Maritime Properties Incorporated and Big Marlin Properties, LLC. That's owner group 1. Owner group 2 is a Thomas Larry Crowder and a Paulette Lewis Swan. They are the owners of the remnant parcel that you heard about previously. Mr. Tom Slaughter is the applicant representative, and the request is a privately initiated rezoning for 9.94 acres from agricultural to neighborhood commercial for 26 properties along Larch Road, immediately north of Whispering Pines Road and west of the intersection of Northwest 3rd Terrace and Nelson Road. Those properties are addressed 801 through 862 Larch Road. They are depicted here on the future land use map. You can see that they are designated as Commercial Activity Center, as are properties to the north. To the west, we have a multifamily residential piece. That's Embers Lake, which is developing out with multifamily buildings. A little further to the north, you might have noticed on that aerial was another subdivision building out. That's Stonehaven. To the east, we have some single-family residential future land use designations, and to the south, we have, in addition to a few parcels that are in an enclave, we have properties that have a single-family and multifamily designation. That the properties on Whispering Pines that have that designation are currently all zoned ag. The present parcels, or the subject parcels, are all zoned ag. Looking to the west, we have multifamily low. To the north, some commercial, and to the east, more single-family residential properties. Now, the applicants are requesting the rezoning to NC, or neighborhood commercial, as depicted on this map. And one more time for good measure, here's an aerial. In Mr. Slaughter's video, you saw that video travel mostly down the, I would call it the northmost boundary of these parcels. And then it made a left, and then it came down to kind of the southmost boundary where we saw some properties on Whispering Pines. That long lake you saw there was in Embers Lake to the north. A little bit of background, I mentioned it earlier, the site's 9.94 acres. We have surrounding uses that are multifamily and single-family residential. The applicant owns 25 of the 26 properties proposed to be rezoned. This rezone has frontage on Nelson Road and is bisected by an easement for a private, unimproved road called Larch Road. The properties have all had a CAC future land use since 2006 and have been zoned agricultural since the adoption of an official zoning map in 1990. There's a number of different criteria that staff reviews a rezoning case on. I will go through those over the next couple slides. They're in LDC section 346. The first question is whether or not the proposed zoning district is consistent with the city's comp plan, and staff notes that the proposed NC zoning district is the only zoning district consistent with the CAC future land use other than a planned unit development. Question 2 questions whether the range of uses in the district will be compatible with existing uses in the area. And staff found that this district does allow vertically mixed use buildings, light commercial and office uses, restaurants, bars, and indoor commercial recreation, and other uses which should generally be compatible with residential uses in the same project. The uses permitted by right within the mixed use district are allowed because there generally shouldn't be introducing any nuisances on residences contemplated to accompany those non-residential uses. The maximum multifamily density allowed is a 16 dwelling units an acre. Although unlikely, if the property was developed with a vertical mixed-use pattern, it could yield up to 865,972 square feet of non-residential uses. traditional restaurant, retail, and strip center uses that would be allowed, which may have some adverse impacts on nearby single-family structures with respect to noise, traffic, and et cetera. Question 3 questions whether or not the range of uses allowed in the proposed zoning district would be compatible with existing and potential uses in the area under consideration. And staff found that the abutting property to the north shares the same future land use as the rezone area and will likely have a similar range of uses. Properties to the west will develop with multifamily units within the approved Embers Lakes Site Development Plan. Property to the east and the south will likely develop with single-family homes based on the zoning and the area of those properties. The neighborhood commercial district should be compatible with the future uses in the area. Question 4 asks whether the proposed zoning district will serve a community need or broader public purpose. The proposed NC district will serve a community need by rezoning a property that is suitable for multifamily development at a maximum density of 16 dwelling units an acre based on the area, configuration, and location of the size. The city has has a documented shortage of multifamily units, as identified in a study completed in 2019, revealing that 1,500 new residential units could be absorbed in the city each year. The rezoning will also allow non-residential development in a developing kind of transitioning area of the city and will contribute towards the city's non-residential tax base. Question 5 asks whether the characteristics of the rezone area are suitable for the uses permitted in the proposed district, and staff notes that the rezone area is suitable for the NZ zoning district. The proposed NZ district is consistent with the Commercial Activity Center future land use classification. The zoning district proposed in the area of the site should allow some flexibility for future development, including an opportunity for mixed use, freestanding residential, and freestanding commercial development. Centralized utilities are available just across the Nelson Road on the east side. The site has 336 feet of frontage on Nelson Road, a major collector roadway, recently improved major collector roadway. And the site has adequate depth and width to accommodate parking, landscaping, and stormwater management. Question 6 asks whether a zoning district other than the district requested would create fewer potential impacts. Staff found that the neighborhood commercial district is the only zoning designation consistent with the Commercial Activity Center future land use classification. Apart from a planned unit development, this is the only zoning district available. Next, staff moved on to look at the comprehensive plan and found that the rezone is consistent with policy 1.15 table 1 and policy 1.15M, noting that this rezone will bring the site into conformance with the CAC future land use classification, which allows a maximum density of 16 units an acre, and found that the rezone was consistent with a goal within the comprehensive plan to provide good quality housing and safe, clean neighborhoods in a broad choice of options. Staff found that the residential uses in the NC district are multifamily and single-family attached, such as townhomes, which the city has a documented deficiency of, and staff is recommending approval of this case. I will stand by for any questions that you have, and I thank you for your time this morning.
Have you had an opportunity to attempt to contact the owner of the other parcel who's not part of this application? I know Mr. Slaughter testified regarding his attempts, but has city staff attempted the same?
The owner was sent a mailing notification of the application, but otherwise, I believe the applicant that they were not able to be contacted.
I apologize for interrupting. Have you received any communication from, I believe it's Mr. Crowther or Ms. Swan?
I have not.
Okay, thank you. And I believe you have 2 other witnesses, is that correct?
I believe there are 2 people that have signed up to speak, and I believe that we have representatives from the fire and police department here, should you have any questions for them.
I'm not talking about the public comment, I'm talking about the staff presentation. I believe that there's a representative of the police and another representative of the fire department, and they're on your team today? Could we have them in sequence, in whatever sequence they want to come up? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. When they come up, would you just like them to speak about their forecasted impacts that they saw, or was there a particular item you wanted them to discuss
I'd
beyond
like
that?
I'd like each of them to address the comments that you made in the staff report. I'm assuming they've had access to your staff report?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir, come on up, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner Mike Russell. I'm the Fire Deputy Chief. Part of my responsibilities with the city are to review any land use changes, new developments, et cetera, for impacts to the fire department. So when I reviewed this one, we have a station that's located in close proximity, a planned station that's also located in close proximity to the planned land use change. I also look at similar properties within the city and what historical impact they've had to our services. And then from there, I make an estimate, if you will, of what impact that will have to the city. So it's kind of specific to Station 8 that covers that district right now versus impact overall to our operations.
Oh, you're the right guy for the job today. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
All right, and have you had an opportunity to review Mr. White's staff report?
Yes, I
Okay.
did.
And he quotes the fire department and the police department. That's why I've asked you to come today. Could you comment on what he's quoting you, or quoting the fire department as saying in the staff report?
Yeah, absolutely. So I provided those comments to him via email, and it's a very short list of questions that I answer for every one of them. It's what district, what anticipated call volume, which I believe was under 200 annually, and then what I believe is a moderate impact to the service to that specific district.
Do you think this rezoning would have a negative impact to public safety from the fire department standpoint?
I do not.
Thank you. Is there anything else you'd care to say?
No, ma'am.
Thank you very much for coming today. And you, why don't you wait just a minute for public comment, and then we can excuse you, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. May we have the representative of the police department up, please? Good morning, sir.
Good morning. My name is Jason Wallace. I'm the Planning and Research Officer for the Police Department.
I'm sorry,
So-
could you spell your last name?
My last name Wallace, W-A-L-L-A-C-E.
Thank you. All right. Have you had an opportunity to review the staff report that Mr. White prepared?
I have.
All right. And I don't know if he's quoting you or someone else, but I'd like to get the testimony on the record, please.
Certainly. He is, in fact, quoting myself. I'm the one that works through some of these details. It falls under my purview as research for the department. The police department is, I'll start by saying, is neither for nor against this change. We are going to remain neutral on all of these. My comments on this are that the concerns of the police department are the impact of traffic in the area. There's several large housing developments and other things going in along Nelson and Tropicana in that area that will impact traffic, any change, any growth. We also have potential concerns with adding, if there's any commercial, whether it's restaurants, whether it's businesses, there could be noise activity and potential for increased nuisance calls for the residential areas nearby. This happens in other areas of the city. A very common one that we see, or that I could reference, would be some of the restaurants and bars in the entertainment district, and we have condominiums literally one street next door to that with different zoning requirements. It's very common for us to see like nuisance complaints, like noise complaints from the residences, even if it's not a violation of the current noise ordinance. So there's a potential for that here. On a positive note, depending on what actually goes in here, there's talk of restaurants, retail, et cetera. While it could impact traffic in the immediate region in a somewhat negative way, it could positively impact traffic in other areas of the city. Currently, with the layout of the city, there's a lot of travel and drive time from residential areas of the city that do not have access to various commercial and have to travel to and transit to other areas of the city. This increases traffic complaints elsewhere. So if local residents local to this area are going to be taking advantage of what goes into this site and not transiting elsewhere in the city, it could reduce traffic complaints elsewhere. So citywide, we don't anticipate any measurable change in our calls to service.
Thank you. That's a very interesting point. I hadn't thought of that before. I appreciate your testimony today. Is there anything else that you would like to say at this time?
Not at all. This has been a very thorough work by our planners and by the developers trying to make this happen, so.
Thank you, I appreciate your testimony very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. All right, this is a public hearing. I have 2 requests to speak from the public. If there are other members of the public who wish to address issues regarding this proposed rezoning, after I've called these 2 names, please feel free to indicate you do want to testify. The first name I have is Claudia Hart, H-A-R-T. Ms. Hart, you're welcome to use the podium near the door if you choose. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Claudia Nelson Hart. You may have heard that middle name, Nelson, was my maiden name. My grandparents homesteaded out there at the turn of the century at Stonewater, where it's being developed. So I grew up in that area before Cape Coral. My father developed Whispering Pines subdivision back in the 60s, way before Cape Coral even thought about coming in there. And I've watched it, unfortunately. I understand growth, but change to concrete and asphalt as other big cities with no respect to the landscape that is needed. So, you know, when I heard about this, one of the concerns is that it's not big enough to do a PUD, thank goodness, but on the other hand, we lose control of what's going to go in there and how us as single-family homes are protected with barriers between this multifamily or commercial and our residential homes. You know, people bought there because it was quiet, and I get change, but this multifamily, and especially the neighborhood commercial on the front with bars and restaurants, are going to create a big hardship and a whole change of life to how we enjoy our life, which was always country living. And so that's very unfortunate that we won't have any type of input on any type of barriers or anything that goes in there after the zoning is passed. And like the police said, it's going to impact the traffic there. And so, you know, I don't think there's any benefit to a neighbor being able to walk to a bar and not go drive half mile down to Pine Island Road. But anyway, very concerned about that. No barrier, no landscaping. We have no control over that. This is a huge one for me personally, and it is a big deal. This property abuts up to my private lake that I own. I own a few acres still left there with actual trees that the city allows other developers to just tear down. And I own a private lake on the end of that road. You probably saw it in the aerial. I do not want one bit of their stormwater to drain into my lake. That lake is there for our family enjoyment. We swim in that lake, we boat in that lake, and we fish in that lake. I go out and feed the fish every day. I do not want fertilizers and pesticides draining into my lake, because if that happens, I will be forced to seek legal action. I heard that they were going to retain the stormwater on their property and not use swales. The natural flow is to go toward Nelson, not into my lake. And so that's what I want. I pay taxes on that water. I couldn't get it exempt from stormwater, even though it is water. But anyway, so that's my objection, is to the neighborhood commercial bar, the whole wide usage of that property and impacting the residents. There's a few residents that are here because there's not a lot of residents in that area. So that's what I'm concerned about. Thank you,
ma'am. Thank you for coming today also. And it's nice to hear from someone who has a legacy with Cape Coral. Thank you. All right. The next paper I have is from, and I'm probably going to mangle your name, I apologize in advance, Lova Pinessa?
Laura.
Laura.
Excuse me, Laura Panessa.
I apologize for that.
I'm a resident of Whispering Pines also, and John and Cassandra are here also. You know, we purchased this property because it was tranquil and peaceful and has beautiful whispering pines on the property. There's wildlife that live there. We bought it because it was zoned agricultural. Now you want to rezone it and put a commercial and mixed resident 3-story high building. It is going to impact us. It's going to impact the traffic there. There are plenty of bars and restaurants and shopping within walking distance already in that area. We are not for this. It will change our lifestyle. And I know this is following on deaf ears, but we want our voice heard. You're going to literally pave paradise. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for coming today, and thank you for your comments. And all public comment is taken seriously, so thank you very much. All right, those are the only two papers I have. Is there anyone else here today who wishes to speak on these issues? All right, seeing none, I will close the public comment part of the public hearing and bring it back to the applicant. Mr. Slaughter, sir, would you come up, please? Thank you. Two questions. First question is, do you have any comment based upon public comment?
Yes, again, for the record, Tom Slaughter. In regards to Mrs. Hart, two issues. The comment in regards to the lack of a planned development process, generally I actually agree with that. In other words, I like small PDs because they allow some understanding to occur as opposed to traditional zoning. But she is right, under a conventional zoning, as long as the future owner complies with those standards in the site development, the public really doesn't have much of an opportunity at that point. The second part, in regards to those impacts that potentially could occur, again, the property owner does not have legal right to use property that they don't own. So again, when the city, just like you saw with police and fire, the utility department as well as public works would talk about essentially during site development, all the work that would be done, infrastructure in front of the development, through the development, but most importantly, your stormwater. It's really a function of what's going to go on top, and until you design what's on top, you don't design the site at that level. So we'll have a better idea through this process, but generally speaking, the site will have to be designed consistent with City of Cape Coral standards. And in this regards, for this type of commercial site, it does not allow just simply open swales and drain it into your neighbor canal. In this case, it requires it to be retained on site. So once we go through engineering, we'll have a better idea of what that is, but we haven't done that level of planning.
Thank you. And my second question is, will you be available to the neighbors if they wish to talk to you about their concerns?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, one of the things I made was, Mr. Reed was here, he pointed out Claudia before the meeting, and one of the things we try to do is, especially like if I'm out there shooting drones, I'll talk to the neighbors, give my card, let them know who I am, what we're doing, but most importantly, let them know, don't just listen to me, talk to the city. There's a process, and that's what they do here, and they do it pretty well.
Okay, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Anything else you want to testify to?
No, ma'am.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. White? Anything else, sir?
Just one thing. I believe one of the second commenter noted that this project was too small for a PUD. It's not. The minimum size is 3 acres. It could technically go down a PUD route, should you wish. I did get to speak with Ms. Hart earlier, and she did relay, that was the first speaker, and she did relay her concern over her private lake. While, as you're aware, we cannot condition these rezoning requests, I did, however, speak with our engineering team, Mr. Heidi, in site development review. He indicated that it would most likely, when this parcel develop, drain towards Nelson Road, but it's not a guarantee that it would drain towards Nelson Road. And beyond that, I don't really have anything else to add.
All right, and I know as staff, you're always available to the public, so they should feel free to contact you if they have other concerns as the situation unfolds.
Well, of course, certainly, ma'am.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
My recommendation goes to City Council. If anyone is concerned about what the recommendation says, and I'm not going to enunciate that at this time, certainly City Council will be very interested in hearing your comments as well at that time. So with those preliminary comments, I'm going to close the first hearing. It is 9:44. Mr. Schropp, do you need a break to set up your presentation, or are you ready to jump right in?
Yes, if we could have about 2 or 3 minutes to set up.
It's 9:44. Let's take a break till 9:50. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're going back on the record, folks. If everyone could take their seats, please, and conclude any conversations they were having, I'd appreciate it. It is 9:54 a.m. We are now about to hear the first hearing that is A on the agenda. It was taken out of order because of our respect for our public safety officials who are here to testify regarding the second hearing, which just concluded. So we are returning to our agenda and starting again with, or starting, I should say, with item number A. And at this time, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner. Case PUD 20-0002, address, access undetermined, applicant GA-Pinnacle Cape Coral LLC. The applicant is proposing to develop a mixed-use community called Hudson Creek that will consist of single-family homes, multifamily units, and several thousand square feet of commercial and professional office space. Hudson Creek represents a total of 1731.9 acres and includes nearly 700 acres of preserves and wetland areas. The MXPUD will also have several conditions regarding access, utilities, and roadway design. The Hudson Creek MXPUD is located in northwestern Cape Coral and has frontage along Burnt Store Road, Chiquita Boulevard, and Jacaranda Parkway. Any person giving testimony today, if you are able, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, Mr. Boyko.
Hi, good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. Chad Boyko, for the record, Principal Planner with the City's Planning Division. I am here initially to provide testimony that this case has been properly advertised. There was an advertisement in the local newspaper of general circulation. There was a sign posted on several frontages for this property, and also we sent letters to residents within 500 feet of the subject property, and all that was done 10 days prior to this public hearing.
Thank you. I will find the proper public notice was given. I also want to put on the record that I performed the site visit. Was there anything else at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. May we have the applicant up, please? Good morning, Mr. Schropp.
Good morning. Is there anything else? Yeah, thanks.
And just use your arrows.
Yeah, the arrows.
Our IT is a little bit different than those in other places, so please feel free to ask Mr. Boyko for assistance.
Okay. I think I'm where I need to be. Thank you very much, Madam Hearing Examiner. For your record, my name is Russell Schropp with the Henderson Franklin Law Firm. Here today representing GA-Pinnacle Cape Coral LLC, which is the owner and the applicant for this rezoning request. I'm here today with our project team that includes David Kraisgrun from GA-Pinnacle Cape Coral LLC, myself and Richard Aiken. My partner Richard Aiken will testify later. Jennifer Sapin, AICP from Baracco & Associates, the project planner. Wes Kane, the project engineer, also from Baracco & Associates. Ken Passarella with Passarella & Associates, our ecologist, environmentalist. And Yuri Baikow, PE from TR Transportation, who handled the transportation analysis and traffic analysis. And also Greg DeSario, our registered landscape architect with David M. Jones and Associates.
Preliminary question, if I may. Would your team prefer questions as we go or questions at the end?
I think questions at the end, but we're happy to do it either way.
All right. Well, and some of my questions may be answered by the testimony today. And another housekeeping matter, it's almost 10 o'clock, it's 9:58. I don't want you to feel, or your team to feel at all rushed, or the members of the public who are here to testify to feel at all rushed. We do have a hard stop at noon, and so if we have some continuation dates to offer, I'm not saying we will continue, folks. I'm just saying I don't want anyone to feel that their testimony is going to be truncated because we have to stop at noon. So
Thank you. I understand that, and we'll just proceed with our presentation. If we need to continue, we'll do that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The project before you today has been a few years in the making. The bulk of the property was annexed in approximately 2005, and GL Pinnacle acquired it in 2016.
Was this the old juvenile justice property that we discussed back in 1994?
I don't believe so. I think this is the old Zemmel property that went through annexation, but I don't believe there was ever a juvenile justice center proposed for here. There was one that I'm aware of that I think was down in the Florida Rock Mine area, but that's the only one that I remember from that time period.
Okay, just out of curiosity.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. In 2019 and 2020, a future land use map amendment was processed for this property, culminating in August of 2020 before City Council at the adoption at that time. You can see the timeline for this plan amendment on this slide. The ultimate plan amendment that was approved resulted in 4 land use classifications being placed on the property in various areas, include mixed use, single family, multifamily, and open space. During the processing of this plan amendment, this rezoning to PUD, mixed use PUD, was applied for in May of 2020 and has been under review since that time. Also, concurrent with this plan amendment and the rezoning, the owner has pursued various environmental permitting through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the South Florida Water Management District, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The residential portion of this project, which you'll hear about later from our planner, has received its district and Corps permits. The commercial and mixed-use area along Burnt Store Road, which you'll also hear about later, is just in the early stages of permitting with these agencies. The request before you today, as was mentioned, is a request to rezone approximately 1,732 acres to mixed-use PUD. The property is presently vacant acreage that stretches along the northern boundary of the city from Burnt Store Road on the west to Nelson Road on the east, with Jacaranda and Wilmington parkways along the southern boundary. You can see the development parameters on this slide here, and they are a wide variety of uses that you would, I think, expect from a large mixed-use planned development in a true mixed-use scenario. The uses include a maximum of 3,500 dwelling units, 800 beds of assisted living, a potential university campus for up to 3,000 students, retail, residential, and office uses of 575,000 square feet combined, and 500 rooms of proposed hotel use. The staff report recommends approval of the request with, I think it's 29 conditions. The applicant has reviewed the staff report thoroughly. It does an excellent job of analyzing the project's impacts and also reviewing the standards and criteria established in the code for review of this PUD, and we'd respectfully request that it be incorporated into the record. With regard to the conditions recommended by staff, there are 3 or 4 conditions that we would seek clarification or minor adjustment on, and we'll go through those at the end of our presentation. There is really only one substantive issue that we have with the staff report that we'd like to discuss in detail, and that involves driveway access onto the main spine road through the project that relates to conditions 5 and 26 of the staff report. After I get done with this preliminary stuff, we'll get into our presentation in chief. Our substantive presentation will begin with Jennifer Sapin. She's the project planner from Baracco and Associates, and she will review the project, the planning and land use matters and issues, and also comp plan consistency. After Ms. Sapin, Richard Aiken from my law firm will discuss the off-site utilities agreement that is being negotiated and has been negotiated with the city, and is tracking along with this rezoning. This is a very significant part of what we have worked on with the city over the last 2 to 3 years, not only for our project, but also for other properties in Northwest Cape Coral that are presently unserved by central utilities. And we want you to understand how the central utilities will be brought to the site to support the development parameters that I just mentioned. So we'll go through that. Richard will go through that in a little bit of detail. After Mr. Aiken, Mr. Kane, Wes Kane from Baracco and Associates will continue with the technical discussion on utilities and also surface water management. And after Mr. Kane, our transportation engineer, Yuri Baikow with TR Transportation, will testify and address the traffic impacts associated with the project. Mr. Passarella and Mr. DeSerio are also here. I do not anticipate they will be part of our presentation in chief, but they are here if there are any questions from you or staff or the general public with regard to the environmental or landscape buffering aspects of the property, respectively. And then after our substantive presentation, I'd like to get into the conditions that we think we need a little bit of adjustment on, and also to discuss the one substantive issue. A few preliminary matters, and I apologize, this is my first hearing before you, and I'm not sure exactly how you handle certain things, but if I need to, I would like to request that the staff report be incorporated into the record of this proceeding along with our PowerPoint. As I noted earlier, the staff report does an excellent job of summarizing the project and analyzing it under the code and comprehensive plan, and we ask that it be included as part of the record.
But for the items you don't agree with?
Well, regardless of the one substantive issue that we have, the analysis is a very good analysis of the impacts and also compliance with the code requirement. We just feel that the condition needs some adjustment and probably is not necessary for the public health, safety, and welfare. So yes, we'll take issue with that one condition. And the others are, I think, just minor adjustments that I've talked with staff about, and I don't think they're in disagreement, but they can certainly speak for themselves.
Thank you. Okay.
The second preliminary matter is qualifying our expert witnesses. I would like to tender Ms. Sapin, Mr. Kane, and Mr. Baikow as experts in their field, as well as Mr. Passarella and Mr. DeSerio, if necessary, if they do testify. I don't know if you want to do that now in mass, or if you would prefer that I do it when they get up to testify individually. I do have their resumes, which we submitted to staff electronically last week, but I do have hard copies for you, if I may.
Thank you. I think as each person gets up to speak, I think it'd be better for the public to understand person by person what the qualifications are. And unfortunately, the CVs didn't make it into the Novus docs. So I think we will need to have testimony from each as to their qualifications.
Okay, may I present the resumes then for your
Sure.
record?
Thank you. Thank you. And copies of these are available to the public as well through the clerk, so.
The last issue is that I'd like to bring up preliminarily is time. I think your procedures kind of specify about a 30-minute time. And
Nobody pays attention to that, Mr. Schropp. Don't worry about it.
Thank you.
I have to ask Mr. Neclario to put his hands over his ears when I say that. But no, that's an illusion, but thank you. We don't have a 30-minute time limit. I do have a small concern, and I hate to go back to the well on this, but if we do run into a time issue, given that it's 10 o'clock, I would like to have public comment. If we are going to continue, I would like to have public comment prior to the continuance, because it may or may not be possible for the members of the public to return.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll cross that bridge, so to speak, when we get there, but I may have to interrupt your presentation at some discrete time.
Okay, and that's fine. We anticipate about 45 minutes. So but if you need to stop us at any point in time, just let us know and we'll adjust accordingly.
But we need to have time for the staff report as well. So.
Yes, as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So with that preliminary matters out of the way, if I may, Jennifer Sapin will do her presentation on land use and planning. She is a certified planner under the state of Florida, has years of experience with Baracco and Associates as their lead planner. She has been recognized as an expert in planning and land use matters in other forums, including the Lee County Hearing Examiner. I believe this is her first presentation here today in this forum, but I would tender her as an expert in land planning and zoning.
If I could just hear her educational credentials.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just in case.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. My name is Jennifer Sapin. I'm an AICP certified land planner. My educational background is at Purdue University, as well as back then it was Edison Community College, and that's when I got into designing and drafting. From there, the interest in engineering fields where I first started as an engineering draftsman. I switched then to land planning, learned that profession, and did pass my certification, and now I'm recognized in most jurisdictions in this area.
Thank you. I will find you as an expert in land planning issues based upon your recitation of your qualifications, also based upon my prior review of your CV, which was provided in timely fashion by your counsel.
Thank you. We'll start here with the general overview of the project. North of the project is all in Lee County jurisdiction. So this project does divide between Lee County and the city of Cape Coral. So to the north of the project is agricultural zoned property with the future land use in open lands, wetlands, and conservation. South of the property is all within the city of Cape Coral. To south, to the east is R1 with two different future land use categories of single family and then parks and recreation, where a future park is coming in there. Heading further to the west is RB1 with single family. And then as you get closer to Burnt Store Road, it's NC zoning with professional and commercial future land use. On the other side of Burnt Store Road is all agricultural zone property in the MX future land use. This side shows the proposed site. What you will notice, first thing when you look at this site is how much green, how much hatch pattern is on this. So that does indicate one of the major land use on this property is conservation. We've done a lot of work to connect this property with the off-site property for optimum mitigation and conservation and flowways. There's two different residential types. If you start down in the southeast portion of the project, that's residential type 2. That area is in the multifamily / single family future land use category. In that area, we are proposing a higher intensity of residential use with multifamily and townhouse allowed there, as well as single family. As you further travel to the north and to the west, R1 residential would allow only single family, or what we call it's a twin villa. It's a fee simple product, but it's a 2-unit fee simple product. So only single family and that lower intensity twin villa product would be allowed in the R1 area. And then you can see each of the residential areas are served by a rec area, and those are located at the entrances. So as people come in, those services will be available to them. Often we put mail kiosks in those, so those types of things will be available to the residents as soon as they come in. You'll notice there's a little pink area kind of in the middle of the site. That is a Lee County land. It's about 20 acres in there that will connect the project together. Just to the south of that, there's a rectangular piece that is owned by the diocese. When annexations were done, there was not a desire of that property owner to annex, and for that reason, it had to remain in the city of Cape Coral. And to not create an enclave, then we too also have an area that is still in Lee County. We have met with Lee County, a pre-application meeting with the zoning staff there to let them know that this was coming and the unusual nature of it. So we will be processing a development order for that little segment of road that will go through there. Moving closer towards Burnt Store Road, you'll see the mixed use parcels. Those allow commercial uses as well as residential. We have also proposed universities and hospital uses where it's a very large mixed use and commercial site. So we really wanted to keep the flexibility open and let the market really react to this new corridor in Cape Coral. And then along Burnt Store Road are the commercial parcels you can see here in kind of pink. This next slide, I'm dividing the next two into kind of the eastern and western portions. This eastern portion, it will all be gated. It will be private roads, privately maintained, and they will be gated. There's 17 acres over here, and 670 of it is preserved, so 44% of the area. So the residents will really be able to enjoy a natural environment where they will live. The 3,500 dwelling units will go mostly in this area with some units allowed in the mixed use. There is a cap of single family at a maximum of 2,500 units. Our traffic impact statement reflects that. There are 30 acres of amenities proposed, and then you can see that 20-acre Lee County parcel that still remains, and as Mr. Straub indicated, an ERP has been issued for this portion of the project. Moving to the mixed-use commercial area, there's 88 acres of commercial uses along Burnt Store, approximately acreage, parcels C1 through C4, and then approximately 94 acres of mixed use. This mixed use, it does create a transition between the commercial along Burnt Store Road and then the single family further into the back of the property. And multifamily is allowed in here, and the ERP is in process. The project provides over 8 access points. The majority of them are on Burnt Store Road. We've got 5 of them shown here. Burnt Store Road is a controlled access road by the Lee County Board of County Commissioners. Access points 1 through 4 have already been approved by them, and access 5 was added just as part of this PUD. If the applicant wanted to use access 5, they would have to go back to the Board of County Commission to get the controlled access plan modified for their permission. Access number 6 is the other main residential access. So 1 and 6 being the main residential access points. The gated entry for access point 6 would come in pretty quickly, whereas the gate for access point 1 would be further back behind the mixed use parcels. There are 2 secondary residential only, residence only access points at 7 and 8. Those access points would not be allowed for anyone other than those living in the property. The idea is for those access points to be really subdued and low impact, but provide that flexibility for access, but not necessarily marketing. We're also proposing 1 additional access point we show here as a plus. This would connect to the future NC property to the south. We think it's a really great opportunity to provide a parallel road, a reverse frontage road along Burnt Store Road. So not only the residents of Hudson Creek could access this future NC property, but the NC property could also access to the north. Looking at here the spine road, on the left you see a bold line running through the project. This is the main thoroughfare through the project. It is behind a gate and will be privately owned and maintained. You'll see that it's a nice right-of-way. We've given extra room at a 60-foot right-of-way, proposing bike lanes, 4-foot bike lanes on both sides of the road, sidewalks on both sides of the road, and 11-foot travel lanes. Not only does this allow bicyclists to easily go throughout the project and access their various little neighborhoods, but it also gives a wayfinding. Sometimes in projects, it's hard to find your way around unless you get a map. With a project like this, as soon as you hit the double-striped bike lane road, you would know this is the main road to hit and exit out of the property. There's a different section for a neighborhood road. These are lower traffic internal roads. The graphic on the left, you can see little red roads kind of spiking off of the spine road. Those are the roads that are currently designed in our ERP. Final design might be a little bit different depending on the final purchaser, but it will most likely be very similar to this since so much work has been done for the ERP and developers are eager to move with this property. Sidewalks are still proposed on both sides of the street. The travel lane is a little narrower, smaller, to a 10-foot travel lane. Of course, that will also help to encourage lower traffic speeds to allow for it to be a shared bicycle street. Phasing of the project ties into utilities a little bit, which our engineer and our attorney will get into, but just looking at the plan and how it will work. So there's a requirement that only up to 100 units can have a single access point. When you go to 101 units, you need to have a second access point. Our project has potential to have phase 1 be on Burnt Store Road, potentially maybe phase 1 at Nelson and Wilmington, or potentially both phases 1s will start at the same time with the eventual goal for those phases to meet in the middle. Doing that, we need to make sure that we meet this table. So to figure out the access points, the primary residential access points, I say Wilmington, but it's the Wilmington-Nelson access, and then Burnt Store. And this note would say that they can be phased independently or phased together. This next slide shows that the secondary access for the Wilmington-Nelson, shown in pink. The secondary access for that is on Chiquita. And the second access for Burnt Store is Jacaranda, shown here with the two blue dots. So one option would be to provide the second access pink to pink, blue to blue. A second option would be to do the pink or blue and then meet in the middle, as long as you meet in the middle before 101 certificate of occupancy. And then, of course, a third access point is required prior to the issuance of the 601st certificate of occupancy. So looking at some comprehensive plan compliance, Conservation and Coastal Management, Policy 1.4.4, promotes mixed-use development and encourages combinations of residential land with commercial land and professional land, and encourages alternate means of transportation through bicycle and pedestrian paths. We've shown that we have a mixed-use development that does combine different uses, and as you've seen, we have provided for bike and pedestrian mobility. Housing Goal 1 is provide good quality housing, offering a broad choice of options. Housing Policy 1.2 is seeking townhouses and a wide mix of housing designs at a variety of densities and intensities. Shown here is our property development regulations table. Consistent with those comprehensive plan policies, you can see there is a wide range of residential products and a mix of uses that are proposed. Many of these lots that you see here, these are minimums. Of course, you can build them larger and you can have larger setbacks. But these are very different than your standard Cape Coral lot. They're very different than the homes to the south. But again, that is the goal, to provide a wide range of housing opportunities. Future Land Use Policy 1.7 recognizes that there's a shortfall of multifamily residential housing. We are proposing multifamily as a use. We see it in two different areas here, shown in pink. The requirement is that they be in proximity to major roadways, and we would like them to transition from commercial uses to less intense uses. The mixed-use parcels M1, M2, I've already said, it provides a great transition between a major arterial road, commercial, the multifamily transition, and then residential and preserve in the back. The area down to the southeast, well, another policy here, again, 8.4, encouraging transition from commercial to less intense. Looking at the southeast, what in pink here is Festival Park. So the city has been working for quite some time to acquire all of those lots, and I believe they're a very high percentage, and that is imminent. And you can also see the future school site and where the reverse osmosis plant is. North of Festival Park is the residential 2 area where multifamily would be proposed. So the more intense Festival Park, this creates a transition and a good use for that Festival Park. The residents will be able to enjoy that then. In the left of the slide, you can see this is on the top where we are proposing residential 1. And of course, in that area, there is only single family abutting us as opposed to a future park. Just want to quickly show the buffer plan. We agree with the staff's condition 23. I've noted it on here. The buffer 4, increasing it from 7.5 feet to 10 feet wide. We do understand that there's some single-family residents along there, and we agree with that would be appropriate buffer. Signage, staff had a condition about signs, and after we got the staff report and looked further into the land development code, the way we understand the Cape Coral's land development code to read as far as signs is the entire face of the sign, other than supporting members, count as the square footage. Well, large residential entry signs, and even ones you see here in Cape Coral, you think of Coral Lakes or Sandoval, they are larger. They do have a lot of architectural elements and a lot of features that I think are attractive, but definitely wouldn't fit within a smaller sign area. So we are proposing this sign graphic that you see here. These would be for residential signs only at Nelson and Burnt Store. As I said, those secondary accesses that were on Chiquita, that those wouldn't have these large grandiose signs like this. So the sign here that you see, I took this from two projects that are being permitted currently today. One of them is in Charlotte County at Babcock. The other was in Lee County on Bayshore Road. I thought the Bayshore Road project was particularly appropriate due to the speeds and design style of Bayshore Road, that Burnt Store Road would need a similar type of signage. So what you see here is various different architectural elements, but I did put some dimensions on there. We realize that there needs to be some limit to the square footage of the sign as well as the architectural elements. So we're requesting not to exceed square foot of 65 feet, but only for the sign face, and to allow additional architectural elements, and to also allow additional internal signs. Small neighborhood signs within the project sometimes occur, maybe when you're going down a particular road, they might have a decorative sign, but that again would be within the project behind the gates. And the commercial signage will be in accordance with the Land Development Code. This shows how the proposed preserve connects with off-site preservation areas and lands that have been, we've got Lee County Conservation 2020, Florida Fish and Wildlife Area, South Florida Water Management District. There has been a lot of activity done out here to preserve and enhance the environment. We feel that we were kind of the hole in the donut, and we're really happy that we were able to connect these flows and these natural flowways through. The arrows that you see, of course, that area does have an ERP on it, and there are box culverts that go between these preserved crossings. So all of that area will be very much connected by this project. The Coastal and Conservation Objective 1.5 is to improve the quality of all surface waters, and Policy 1.5.2 is to conserve and protect its wetlands. I believe the previous slide demonstrated that very nicely. Coastal and Conservation Management Objective 1.2 is to protect natural communities, listed species, and their habitats. A species survey was done, and if you have any questions on that, Ken Passarella is here for questions. And this is my last slide, and we'll turn it over to the utility discussion now. So this kicks this off. Infrastructure Policy 2.3.3. This project is not in the urban service district, the transition area. It is in the reserve area. However, you are able to expand into that area by this policy if there is adequate capacity and if there's developer contributions. Capital Improvement Objective 3 is that all future development will bear its proportionate share of its costs. Well, the developer is planning to 100% privately fund the expansion of water, sewer, and irrigation. And the little image here shows that there is sufficient capacity for potable water, sanitary sewer services. It might be if you have any questions for me now, would you like to do that before we move to utilities?
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner Richard Aiken with the Henderson Franklin firm. Here today to just talk about the status of the utility agreement between the city and the developer in this matter. As you've heard a little bit, and as you see from reading the staff report, there's a contemplated extension of the offsite utilities to the area. The offsite utility agreement has been negotiated between the developer and the city. It would provide for extension of potable water transmission mains, wastewater transmission collections, and irrigation transmission. The agreement as currently in its form would provide for the developer to extend the utilities to the project down Old Burnt Store Road along a route to be determined by the city to design specifications provided by the city. The size and the capacity of the transmission lines is to be determined by the city. There have been numerous discussions between the developer and the city about those sizes, and ultimately the idea here is that there will be capacity for a lot of development beyond what would be this project in those lines as they're extended. And so by bringing the utilities up that direction to the project, there will also be utilities extended to many others in the area, other projects and other homes and parcels. The offsite improvements will be transferred to the city upon completion by the developer. As far as the status of the agreement, there have been, as I mentioned, numerous negotiations, numerous meetings between staff, city attorney's office, and the developer and its representatives. That we began having these back when we were doing them remotely because we couldn't be in person, and have continued them through current time. The city's overall utility expansion plan has been taken into consideration as part of the discussion over the off-site utility agreement. It is my understanding, based on conversations with the city attorney's office and staff at this time, that the agreement is ready to be approved by city council. And the plan, as I understand it, is to present the off-site utility agreement to city council either at the same time as the zoning or shortly thereafter, sometime very closely. So with that, that concludes what I have to say about the off-site utility agreement, unless you have any questions.
I do have a question. I read in one of the documents provided prior to the hearing that there was a comp plan amendment required. Are you going to address that as well?
Yes, Your Honor. It's my
not the substance of it. That's not my issue, but the timeline for it.
So, Madam Hearing Examiner, my understanding from discussions with city staff recently was that that will occur after the zoning goes through, and that it would be just a matter of course. It'd have to be moved to the transition area, is my understanding, so that would come next. That's my understanding.
Okay, I'll address it with staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. For our next witness, we call Wes Kane. He's the registered professional engineer within the state of Florida. He's a project engineer here, and I would tender him as an expert in civil engineering, and you're free to ask him any questions.
Thank you. Come on up, sir. And I know I think everyone's been sworn, so I don't have to keep asking that. Mr. Kane, can you advise me of your qualifications, please, sir?
Yes, ma'am. I graduated from Florida Gulf Coast University in 2012 with a bachelor's in science and civil engineering. I received my professional engineer's license in the state of Florida end of 2015, beginning of 2016, I guess, depending on when the test was passed versus when my license was approved, but right there at that timeline. I've been with Brocco & Associates for going on 16 years. My resume has been provided, and I have been accepted as an expert witness in other venues, City of Fort Myers, Lee County, Collier County, in matters involving land development, including utilities and stormwater management and transportation.
Thank you. Based upon your recitation of qualifications and based upon my prior review of your CV, which was provided in timely fashion prior to this hearing, I will find you as an expert for matters you're testifying about today. Thank you.
Thank you. So as previously discussed by Richard, there is sufficient capacity within the system per the utility availability letter that's shown on the screen, and that developer-funded infrastructure is required to support this development, and that is in the process with city staff. This is a sort of conceptual map that's been discussed with city staff and the applicant as far as some of the concepts and depictions of where the utilities may run. The final corridors and diameters of these utilities are to be provided by city staff once they're finalized. As far as stormwater management system, there's a conceptual ERP permit for the overall residential portion of the project. The commercial area is in the works right now. The water quality and attenuation is provided by the on-site water management lakes. The commercial area will provide its own dry detention for pretreatment, water quality, and attenuation in accordance with South Florida Water Management District Applicant's Handbook. The residential development has several basins that all discharge and multiple outfalls to the wetland flowway and on-site preserves. That mimics the historic flows and wetland hydrology in those areas. Again, the system will treat and attenuate prior to discharging to these on-site wetland systems. There was ongoing coordination resulting in specific design measures to preserve the historic flowways through this property with Charlotte Harbor Flatwoods Initiative, Florida Wildlife Commission, and representatives within the City of Cape Coral. Again, the Water Management District conceptual ERP is approved for the overall residential area, with the commercial area is in progress. With that, I'll turn it over to
I do have a couple questions.
Yes, ma'am.
If you could go back to the utility map that you had earlier, could you show me where on this map the utilities would be servicing the proposed university?
There's two routes that are considered on this map. One coming up Old Burnt Store Road, which crosses over Kismet, and then up to the commercial aspect of this property. There's another option, I believe that's part of a potential phase one, where the force main would run up Nelson Road and tie into the residential aspect on that eastern edge.
Thank you, that's a good answer. And my second question is, if the timeline for the utility extension doesn't coincide with the timeline for construction of residential properties, is the developer or is the applicant considering putting in septic systems? What are we thinking about here?
As far as I know, there have been no septic systems considered as part of this project. It's been central sewer and facilities to date.
I understand that, but my concern is if those two things do not coincide, what happens next? Perhaps we can
Sure.
address that later.
Okay.
Thank you.
For your record, Russell Schropp, and just to address the question that you just asked Mr. Kane, there are conditions in the staff report that do address the timing of central sewer and water getting to the site, and we're going to suggest a small modification to them, but the intent would be that, yes, this connects to central sewer or water, and if for some reason there's a slip in the process, we'll be back to modify or revisit those zoning conditions. But at this point, the alternative being considered is simply extension of central sewer and water to the site, and then eventual hookup, and no building permits issued until construction is underway.
Right, and I do want to review my question when we come to the condition part. I don't want to be premature in my comments, but I think that maybe we need to tighten that up a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'd like to call on Yuri Baikow from TR Transportation Consultants. He also is a registered professional engineer in the state of Florida. He was our traffic consultant for this project, and he will address traffic impacts. He has also been recognized as an expert in other forums, and I would tender him as an expert in those fields today.
Thank you.
Thank
All right. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. For the record, Yuri Baikow with TR Transportation Consultants. I have been sworn in. I've been previously accepted as an expert in transportation planning in Lee County, Collier County.
I think you've been here before.
I have been here before, yes. And before, I think I've been before you about a year ago or 2 years ago, and I wasn't a registered professional engineer at that time, but now I am.
I remember we had that conversation.
Yeah, I remember. So now I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Florida. I've been with TR Transportation Consultants for over 5 years, which is a local firm here in Fort Myers that's been providing professional services like preparing traffic studies for many, many years. And so I would like to be accepted as an expert today as well.
I will accept you as an expert based upon your recitation of qualifications and your CV, which I have reviewed prior to today. And congratulations on getting your PE.
Thank you very much. So before I get to a discussion regarding the traffic study, I first want to put on the record that as part of our annexation process, we've donated approximately 155 feet of right-of-way along Bernster Road, or a total of 22 acres to the city of Cape Coral and Lee County at no cost. And that was done to address the anticipated widening of Bernster Road in the future to a 4-lane facility. As you know, this road has been already widened to the south of this project, and it's anticipated to be widened adjacent to the site as well in the future. Regarding traffic study, as with any traffic study or with any development that generates over 300 trips in the city of Cape Coral, you're required to do a traffic study. And before, with any traffic study that I do in the city of Cape Coral, I go through a methodology meeting with the city's transportation staff to discuss the scope of the traffic study and what's needed to be provided for the approval. So then we prepared a trip generation analysis, which was done based on the latest practices, as well as the IT trip generation manual, which is a manual that we use, or a source that we use to come up with the trips generated for development. And based on our trip generation analysis, this project is estimated to generate approximately 4,512 net new weekday PM peak hour two-way trips, which is the trips that will be added to the surrounding roadway network. As with any mixed-use development, there's going to be a certain internal capture of trips within the project. So there might be folks who live in the residential community here that might be using the commercial or restaurant facilities on site, or in other words, not travel on the surrounding roadway network and stay within the project. We then completed the level of service analysis on the surrounding roadway network. With project this size, there was a few amount of roadways we had to analyze to make sure to check for capacity. And results of our level of service analysis indicated that Bernstow Road from Tropicana to Kismet, Nelson Road, Kismet Parkway, Chiquita Boulevard, Santa Barbara Boulevard, Diplomat Parkway, Tropicana Parkway, and Andalusia Boulevard are all projected to operate at acceptable level of service, D or better, in the future with our project traffic added to these roadways. Now, there was a certain segment of Bernstow Road that was shown to operate at a poor level of service with our project, but that's because it was based on the current two-lane configuration. Once this Bernstow Road is widened to 4 lanes, that will address the level of service deficiency. And actually, Department of Transportation started what's called a project development environmental study to evaluate the widening of this road to 4 lanes adjacent to our site. And that study is expected to be completed in the fall of 2023. So that's all was done as part of our traffic analysis at this time. The staff has reviewed our traffic analysis and they concluded with our results and conclusions. There's going to be a much more detailed traffic study done once we go through a site development approval process with the city. That traffic study is going to look at site-related improvements such as intersection analysis and turn lanes. And so that concludes my part of the presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes basically the presentation in chief and the overview of the project and addressing impacts associated with it that we had planned today. As I indicated at the beginning, there are several conditions that we would like to discuss. I think 4 of them are relatively minor adjustments or tweaks in the wording, including the utility condition that I addressed earlier. And then we have the one substantive issue that we would like to do a little bit more presentation on. So with that, that's what we intend to get into now at this point.
That's fine. Would you prefer having staff do their staff report first and then go over the conditions and then you review your conditions? It's up to you. I don't have a preference.
Either that, or if you want to make sure you get public input today, that would not be a bad time to do it at this point. But I will handle it whatever way you would like.
I think conceptually, if this is not going to impact on your presentation, I think I would like to go forward with public input.
I think this would be the appropriate time to do that, and then we can get into the conditions if we're not going to go straight through the presentation. So that's fine with me.
I understand what you're saying. Thank you. Mr. Boyko, do you have any objection to having public input prior to your presentation?
No objection. No. I have no objection.
Thank you. All right. All right, so we're going to go a little bit out of our norm, folks. We are going to go to public input, and the reason we're doing that is a lot of times we find that people come to discuss their concerns with a project, and once again, I don't know that this is going to be continued, but if it is going to be continued and someone cannot return to provide public comment at that time, there's a certain level of frustration, which I would certainly understand. So at this point, I am going to open public comment. I have several requests to speak, and if I can find, here they are. If you do wish to speak and you have not filled out one of the sheets to speak, that's perfectly fine. Once I've called the folks that have signed up to speak, I'm going to ask a general question, and if anyone else wishes to present testimony at that time, that's fine. You would be sworn in at that time. So with those comments, I'll turn to the first person, Mark A. Earp. You've indicated you wish to testify. Come on up, sir, please. And you'll probably find it more convenient to be at that podium than down here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My major concern with this project, we're located off Burnt Store where the main entrance is going to be. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that area, during the summertime, it is a giant floodplain. And my biggest concern is the redirection of the sheet flow from the project. Is it going to bring it down on my road that has never flooded? The county has done work on the conservation land, and they assured me that it would only retain 6 more inches of water. And after Irma, it came true. I had 6 inches of water on my road. The traffic is going to be an issue. I don't know what the county has plans for Burnt Store Road. There's a large drainage pipe that comes out of the conservation land and goes under Burnt Store Road. I just don't want to be flooded, was my major concern.
Thank you. And for purposes of advising the applicant, do you have any objection to my telling them what street you live on?
I live on James Walter Road.
Thank you.
Or James Walter Lane.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd care to say at this time?
Other than the environmental impact it's going to have, I got up Saturday morning to otters in my pond, and I don't want to see that change.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and thank you for coming today. I appreciate the extra effort everyone in the public takes to attend these hearings. The next one I have is Hans, I'm sorry, I can't read your last name, Stumpfel? I probably screwed that up. I apologize, sir.
Hello, everybody. I bought my first property over there 13 years ago. The reason was to be out in the nature. I owned 2 more properties in there, sold one 2 weeks ago. So my concern is that the impact around us disturb our privacy, the high traffic who's coming right next to us, the main entrance. And like Mark said before, the biggest concern is the flooding. In the summertime, around us, the water goes around us like the road where you put them, you want to put in the main road. This is like a river in the summer. All the water goes from the nature preserve behind to Burnstow Road. And how you make big pipes underground to drain all the water to Burnstow Road to get the water away from us. That's the biggest concern, the water.
Was there anything else?
No, thank you.
Thank you for coming in today and taking the time to testify. I appreciate it. All right, the next one I have is Steve Henry.
Yeah, along with these gentlemen, I live on Sanctuary Estates Boulevard, our road there, and I have a letter that I'll turn into Mr. Boykin later on with all of our concerns here, so it goes on the record.
You're welcome to read your letter, sir, if you want.
Most of these guys are going to kind of just be a repeat of the comments is what it would be. Okay?
That's your choice. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. I have 2 concerns. The first was, along with these guys, but one was the recreation area and all those areas that are going to be there for, I guess, recreation, clubhouse and everything else. It looks like they put it right in our backyard. And with all that area that you've got, it seems like now would be the time to maybe consider moving it away and leaving some preserve there, rather than put up a wall, because I can imagine lights, noise, and everything else. And, you know, we got a nice little neighborhood. You should drive over this sometime and look at it. It's a great neighborhood. And if you were living there, you know, that's not asking too much, I wouldn't think, just to to move it. Okay, we can't stop it, but maybe just move it and consider that rather than put it right up in our backyards. That'd be something you guys would consider. And number two, the one gentleman talked about transportation. I've seen him before at Cape. I'm a member of the Lee County Advisory Board for Transportation. I've been a member for 5 years representing Cape Coral. And I know that the engineering study is going to be done. They moved that up a couple years. This is as our last meeting. Construction is still looking to be 3031. And so I would think you guys want to consider that. That 4-lane will not be done until 2030 or 31, according to my latest record that I've got. So we're going to be careful there, because that 2-lane is not going to support what we're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for coming in today. Appreciate your comments. All right, the next one I have is Gary Jenkins. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I've been a longtime resident since 1973 when we moved down here. I've lived all around Cape Coral, and I've seen great improvements to the city. Some improvements have been very beneficial to the citizens, and some have been a little bit adversely affecting citizens. So I'm not opposed to growth, and matter of fact, I would like to see this land developed, just not in the way that it's designed. The primary concern with the rest of the residents is the flooding. I built my house out there last year, so I haven't even lived there for 1 year. But when I purchased this property, I did my research, and I saw that the commercial land was originally as a multi-use preserve in 2016. That's what it was on the Cape Coral future land use map. Since then, it somehow got developed or future land use of commercial. So if I would have known that, I would have never purchased this property. And somehow, on the Lee County permit, this is already a mixed use land with no history of rezoning. So I don't know what's going on and how this is getting zoned, but it's not without any, we don't have any input up to this point, or at least it doesn't seem like it. So there's a little bit of the history there. Now I mentioned I just built this property, and it is a lovely area. It's an agriculturally zoned area. I just started planting fruit trees and plan on getting animals. Some of our residents have animals. Well, if you go and look at the overall project, it seemed like the planners are only planning for their use, and it's going to adversely affect the compatibility between the lands. We're agriculture, and you're going to stick a 500 hotel room, 3,000 university students, commercials, and have the road just 35 feet from agriculture land, where the rest of the Hudson Creek, if you look at the overall development, there's a lot of preserved land there and lakes, basins, that the residents get the view, where now the 5 property owners in Sanctuary Estates, off Sanctuary Estates Drive, have to look at a road in the backyard. Now, there is a buffer that's planned, and there's been a lot of question and answers with staff about that buffer. And basically, the developers say that the 35-foot buffer exceeds the Cape Coral and Lee County development code for that. Well, 35 feet isn't from me to that red scooter walker right there. And you're going to put in a road that close to agricultural lands. So we have to look at a road, and it's going to service 3,500 residential units. Now, granted, it's not a through road, but it is gated and you can go through it. 3,500 units. And that doesn't even include the commercial property that is going to use that as an access road, and the multifamily use property that's going to use that road as well. So there's going to be traffic at all hours. And in addition, the buffer, the 35-foot buffer, says up to 5 canopy trees, 5 accent trees, and 66 shrubs per 100 linear foot. You can look out here, and that's not sufficient. You got it right out here, and the shrubs are down at 2 foot. It doesn't specify how the plantings should be as maintained. Now, there is a note in there that says that they can put in a 6-foot high opaque wall. I would like to see a wall put in. I would like to have that separation between my agriculture land and commercial and multi-use land, in addition to the spine road that's going into Hudson Creek, that's servicing 3,500 residents. Also, I would like to see another, or even, this is a way of doing it, the way it's been planned. It's not the way. It's not a necessary improvement like Veterans when it came into the city of Cape Coral, Veterans Parkway. That was a necessary improvement that benefited the city. This is not a necessary improvement that's going to benefit the citizens that are already there. This is adverse compatibility between the lands. I have recommendation of finding a new access point off of Burnt Store Road. To the north, there is Lee County property, 19-acre parcels that could easily be bought and not impact the residents 35 feet away. That's one recommendation, is to look into seeing if there's a different access point that can be made that won't impact the current residents of Sanctuary Estates and James Walter Lane. If that's not reasonable, increase the buffer between Sanctuary Estates properties and the spine road going into Hudson Creek and servicing the commercial and multi-use properties. Also, providing that opaque wall. I know that in the notes it says that it will reduce the amount of plants that have to go in there, but that's all right, because a shrub can look very scraggly or it can be very dense. There's no description of how these things should be maintained. So a wall greater than 6 foot. I know there's different codes and ordinances and everything, but you're talking about agricultural lands butting up to commercial and multifamily that can go up to 4 stories. An 8 to 12 foot wall would be much better than a 6 foot that it's up to developer whether or not they want to put it in or not want to put it in. There's no language that says they have to put that in there. It just says that it's an option. Let's make it mandatory. That might be just sufficient enough for some privacy. Might. But increasing the buffer zone between Sanctuary Estates and this development would be beneficial for both parties. That's my main concern. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir, and thank you for coming in today. I know sometimes people have to take time off of work to come in, so I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. All right. Santel or Santella?
Good afternoon. Again, I live on Sanctuary Estates along with the other gentleman over here. 40-year resident of Cape Coral. Again, seen a lot of growth. Retired 30 years law enforcement here. Seen a lot of problems with that growth. Been on that street for 22 years. Things have changed. We can't fight progress. And we don't want to fight progress. We want to be reasonable. And there's a word, incursion, that's been thrown around a little bit. And I'm on the corner of Sanctuary Estates at the end. So I have the worst end of the deal. I have two corners of my property. And from what it looked like, that access road number 1 is going to be like 60 foot wide, which means street lights, which means, and we have wildlife. There's meat hogs, there's goats, there's horses, there's chickens, there's all that kind of stuff. That's why it's called Sanctuary Estates. We might need to change our name, maybe, because it's not much of a sanctuary. However, looking at this beautiful development, I wouldn't mind living there because those residents are going to have a sanctuary because they're going to face to preserve. They're a mile or thousands of feet from the main road or construction. But the existing neighborhood of 40 acres and a dozen properties are just being ignored, it looks like. Now, again, we can't fight progress, but that 30-foot buffer, maybe a 300-foot buffer, that 6-foot fence, maybe 8 or 12 like on the side of a highway, I'm not sure. Even with all that, you're still not going to change the light. You know, last night I was on my beach, out there by my pond, look up the stars. That's never going to happen again. Won't be able to see the stars. The actual clubhouse is going to be, again, another 30 feet from what it looked like from my property. And it says recreation area. That means pickleball tournaments. That means tennis. That means basketball. That means other 60-foot poles with lights on them. It's going to be literally right in the backyard. So, again, we can't stop the progress, but understand the traffic from that road is going to just ruin our quality of life. The noise from the clubhouse, the activities, the sport courts, the barrier, I feel, from what we're looking at is unreasonable at this point. Security is going to be an issue. Livestock's going to be an issue. We get horses that get spooked, if anyone cares, and goats that get afraid when cars drive by. The environmental issues, we've had deer in our yard, not anymore. We have panther out there. There was a panther, a dead panther on the side of Burnt Store a couple years ago. The carcass was gone by the time I came back. Somebody took it, but we have everything out there, the bald eagles, the tortoises, and all that kind of stuff. I know you have an expert in every one of these divisions, an expert in every one of the topics that you have rebuttal for the capitalism of making this development, and we don't mind it. But again, you got to consider what's going on with these people that are there already. We feel like just we're being ignored and the consideration is not there, or maybe you never. I'd like to ask everyone that was the expert who's been on Sanctuary Estates. Any raise of hands? Who's been on Sanctuary Estates Drive? All the experts?
Sir, we don't normally have interactions with the
But
applicant.
they weren't raising their hands, though. But anyway, so the point is maybe they can take a ride and see the properties that are there and the fence lines. And again, we've been there for a long time. It's called Sanctuary Estates for a reason. This is going to change the whole dynamic. And part of the points on the wall are how it affects what's going on, you know, the local. And we are the local. And it's not one house, it's a whole neighborhood. Mike Greenwell developed this in 1986 to be away from everybody else, you know? So that's our concern, that's our voice. I don't feel it's deaf ears, but we would like to see something else, and we don't want to go to the next level between everybody. We don't want to do the whole, have our own council come up here and block anything or get the environmental experts beyond the experts that find a little beetle that you can't build or all that sort of stuff. So we don't want to go that way. We just want to have a reasonable buffer with light and sound and noise to keep our sanctuary a sanctuary. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your service in law enforcement.
You're welcome.
And appreciate you coming in today. The next card I have is Richard Nesland. You indicated on your sheet you did not wish to testify. Have you changed your mind, and do you wish to testify, sir? No. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking the wrong direction. All right, thank you, I appreciate that. Let me just make a... All right, is there anyone else who would like to talk or present testimony or public comment? Yes, sir, come on up. Madam Clerk, would you swear him in when he gets to the podium, please? The clerk is going to swear you in, and then I'm going to ask you...
Sorry, I didn't turn in, so should I first or?
Oh, you were sworn in? Okay. Okay, go ahead. And would you state your name for the record, please, sir?
Yeah, I have just a little clarification. I own the property east of the proposed development, very parallel to the Century Estate Drive. Is there any access or through road plan so those property can be connected? Because I think there was some easement, but if the plan goes, all those would be mostly landlocked. So if there is,
sir, we don't normally have questions answered at public comment. I will ask staff to address that as best he can. But could I have your name for the record, please, sir?
Yeah, T as in Delta, I as in Internet, V as in Victor.
Okay, thank you very much. And do you have a sheet, a sign-in sheet? All right. Our clerk will take that. Thank you.
So I just need clarification if there is any. If not, it would good to have so the other property owner next door can access their property. That's it.
Thank you very much for your comments, sir, and thank you for coming in today. I appreciate that. Is there anyone else that would like to testify at public comment? All right, seeing none. All right, thank you very much. Seeing none, I'll close the public comment section of the public hearing, bring it back to the applicant. Mr. Schropp, I'm inclined to go ahead with the staff report at this time, but since we are following a unusual schedule, I wanted your input whether you wanted to proceed with your presentation or not.
How long do you think it'll be? Whatever your pleasure is, and we're happy to wrap up and do our conditions at the end, the conditions we'd like to talk about, if staff would like to go now.
What I'm thinking is I'd like to have the staff report with the staff conditions, and then you can address, I think that would flow the hearing better.
Perfectly fine with us.
And I also don't know if you want to address public comment at all, but if you do you want to address it now or at the end?
At the end, please.
All right, fine. Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Boyko, sir, thank you.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. Once again, for the record, Chad Boyko, Principal Planner with the City's Planning Division. Based upon my credentials obtainable with the City Clerk and upon previous confirmation of being an expert witness, I would also like to be recognized as an expert witness in the field of planning and zoning for this presentation.
Thank you. I will recognize you as an expert for purposes of the land planning issues we're addressing today. And that decision is based upon your prior testimony regarding issues that are similar to this, to the matters in front of us today, and also based upon your CV, which is of record with the clerk. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So this is Hudson Creek Mixed Use Plan Unit Development, otherwise known as PUD 20-0002. The owner for this is GA Pinnacle Cape Coral LLC. The representative is mainly Baracco & Associates, as they were the principal submitter of the application for this, and there are others that are also responsible for this as well. The project request is a mixed-use planned unit development, and the location is, you actually have several locations for this property. It's in Northwest Cape Coral, it's east of Burnt Store Road, north of Jacaranda Parkway, and then west of Chiquita Boulevard. It's a rather large project, so there's lots of many different locales that you could ascribe to this. And then the area of the project is 1,732 acres in total. So here we have just sort of a general location map within the city of Cape Coral, and then an outline of the map that you have in front of you. It's like we mentioned, it's Northwest Cape Coral. It's almost near some of the outer boundaries. To the north of this property is mostly unincorporated Lee County land, and there's also a couple of pockets here and there within the site as well that goes between the property as well. Surrounding development, for the most part, is generally just limited to single-family residential development. There are a couple of burrow pits that were developed many years past that were south of sort of that Burnt Store Road frontage area. The remainder of the development is mostly to the north. There is no development. It's mostly preservation land, either owned by Lee County, by the state, or as you heard previously, you do have one or two parcels that may be privately owned that are within unincorporated Lee County. And then also to the south of the Wilmington Parkway frontage area, you do have the Festival Park area that is planned by the city of Cape Coral for future construction in a couple of years. So what is a planned unit development? Per our code, this is really an area that is designed for development as a cohesive unit where uses and innovations in design and layout of the development provide public benefits when compared to standard zoning. We had it mentioned earlier within the previous rezone that a developer can choose one of two paths to develop. You can either follow conventional zoning, whereby you follow all strict requirements of the code regarding setbacks, height, uses, and things like that. Or you have the planned unit development process, which is more of a collaborative effort between staff and the applicant, where you can kind of find some common ground on what the uses are going to be. You can have differences in layout and height, setbacks, so that you have a different style of community rather than your traditional conventional zoning. For this project in particular, it works well because it is not a small development. At 1,700 acres, you're looking at a very large project where with a master plan development, you would want to have some back and forth between the applicant and staff in order to find a development that is really beneficial to the city as a whole and to also some of the surrounding developments and residents that are nearby. So the components that we have within our planned unit development, first we have the rezone, which is to go to the mixed use planned unit development. And then the second component of this is the master concept plan. So the requests within PUD 20-002, the Hudson Creek mixed-use development, is rezone a 1,732 acre site from single-family residential, commercial, in Lee County zoning to that MXPUD district, and then approval of a master concept plan for the following: a maximum of 3,500 dwelling units, which would allow up to 2,500 single-family homes, a maximum 800-bed assisted living facility, a maximum 3,000 student university, a maximum of 425,000 square feet of retail and restaurant uses, a maximum of 150,000 square feet of office uses, and lastly, a maximum of 500 rooms of hotel space. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to develop all of that. For instance, I know that there was mention of the university in particular. This is just what would be allowed on the site. It's not a guaranteed approval of the university or of the hotel space or the retail and restaurant uses, but this is rather a worst case scenario of what sort of the development potential could be allowed within the mixed-use planned unit development.
Would that incorporate a college versus a university, that umbrella definition?
Yeah, in general, higher education, university, college, same difference in our in city staff eyes.
Or a technical college, something of that ilk. All right, thank
Correct. Yeah, within our code, we would specify that use as secondary education, I believe.
And secondary is high school, I think.
Or we have the use listed out within the schedule of uses as to allow that university or college.
I understand what you're saying. Thank you.
So, site history. Portions of the site, mostly along the Burnt Store Road frontage and that sort of triangle that is along Wilmington Parkway, have been within Cape Coral for several years. Other portions, mainly the interior of the site, were part of what we generally refer to as the Zimmel annexations that were done, I want to say, around 13 to 14 years ago. It included the interior portions. I may be off a little bit on those years, but we generally refer to them as the Zimmel annexations. There was this portion of the site, and then there's also some area along US 41 in northeast Cape Coral. So the entire site is undeveloped. The future land use of the site is mixed use, single-family residential, single-family, multifamily residential, and open space. The area along Burnt Store Road, it did at one point have a mixed-use preserve future land use classification. We had a gentleman mention that previously. That still did allow for commercial development within that. It was a mixed use. The mixed use preserve also did have some area that you have to reserve for preservation land, depending on what kind of class it was. That future land use designation was scuppered a couple of years ago. It was a very cumbersome land use designation to try to administer. There hadn't been any development in there, and with the inclusion of the planning and development process that we adopted a couple of years ago, we thought that the mixed-use preserve had lots of conditions on how you could develop. Well, the PUD sort of replaced that. So the mixed-use preserve area was had a land use amendment to the mixed-use district. The single-family residential, multifamily residential area, which is along Wilmington Parkway, that had been designated per the City of Cape Coral for several years. And then the single-family residential and then the open space were done within the last couple of years. That was the future land use map amendment that was approved by council, I want to say 2 to 3 years ago.
And I know that you're one of the authors of the revision to the Land Development Code, and I appreciate the background information and historical information that you've just provided. Thank you.
You're welcome. So what are the characteristics of the site? The site is a mixture of both wetlands and upland areas. We've mentioned, and the applicant has mentioned several times, that it borders large state or county-owned preservation areas on several sides, mostly to the north of the site. There is no existing constructed roadway access to the site, at least not in terms that we would recognize as an official city road or city street. There are no utilities available, as we mentioned earlier. There are some Charlotte County lines that are nearby to this site, or at least might run along the frontage. I'm not entirely sure how far along they go, but those lines are really sort of capacity limited, and most of that capacity is actually dedicated to an RV park that is located to the south west of this property.
Has that been developed yet?
It is, it's been stop-start. I believe when I drove past it a couple of weeks ago, they are restarting construction on that. So I think there's actually might be a couple of buildings that are like halfway finished.
And I think there's some other development nearby that's also hoping to use the Charlotte County process too.
Yes. So those lines, while they're there, there's only around 50,000 gallons per day capacity left within those lines. So for something that is this size, obviously those lines would not be sufficient for the development within here. And also, the applicant kind of touched on this previously, there is sort of like a little rectangular piece of property that connects the Wilmington portion to the main interior portion. That is not within the City of Cape Coral. It will be utilized as part of the development, but it is not part of the planning development, as it's not within the City of Cape Coral. It's still within unincorporated Lee County, and they'll have to get a limited site plan or limited review or whatever process that Lee County uses for that, to have that connection access between the two areas of Hudson Creek. So before you have your master concept plan. The applicant kind of touched on this previously. We've given a couple of arrows to show some of the areas in question. The commercial area is along Burnt Store Road, and there's sort of four little areas of that commercial, mostly determined by where the street access will be in the future. The mixed-use area is just east of the commercial area, near the Burnt Store Road frontage. And then from there on, as you go in east, you have your residential pods. On the map here, you can see, I know the amenity center that is near Sanctuary Estates has been mentioned several times. I'm kind of just indicating here with the mouse. It is nearby to Sanctuary Estates, and there is a portion of it that does kind of touch there. In the middle of that area also, there was an identified eagle's nest that was done at the time of application. So there would be some buffering required and an eagle management plan that would be required during construction. The single family area is really within that main central area. And as you go even further east, you get into your residential type 2 area, which allows for single family and multifamily. And then there is another recreation area that is proposed at the very sort of east end of the development near the Wilmington Parkway frontage. You also see on the master concept plan, you have the master spine road that kind of connects all the little pods to each other, and that is the master concept plan. So we mentioned previously that there's four sort of separate areas of development: commercial, mixed use, the single family, and then the multifamily, which does also allow for single family, but for the purposes of discussion, we'll classify it as multifamily. There's that central spine road that runs throughout the development. It sort of connects the east and the west sides of Hudson Creek to each other. You'll have access from Burnt Store Road, Wilmington Parkway, Jacaranda Parkway, and then Chiquita Boulevard. The Jacaranda Parkway, that was sort of a late inclusion to this, and I believe the applicant has stated previously that that is it's an optional sort of access. We didn't really do a large analysis on it, but we realized that it would probably alleviate some of the traffic from the Spine Road coming into that, so staff was okay with that proposed Jacaranda Parkway entrance. One key feature of this concept plan and this development is that there are very large areas of preservation and open space. Some of that was probably done by necessity, considering as most of those areas are wetlands, but those areas of preservation and open space are also designated with their future land use classification of open space. There are those 2 recreational amenity areas that will be proposed, and then entries into the residential areas will be gated as stated by the applicant. So the next component to the master concept plan is with PUDs, you get to kind of design your own zoning district. So with this, there has been some give and take between the applicant and staff. And as you heard, we have gotten to a point where we have come to an agreement, or they are okay with what we suggested with the changes to this. And I won't go through all of these development regulations because there's a lot that goes on here, but there will be smaller lot sizes for the single family and some of the single family style products like the single family attached than what you would normally find within Cape Coral. Typical lot sizes within Cape Coral are 10,000 square feet, give or take. That's kind of the minimum that we've always had. Single family within Hudson Creek can go all the way down to 4,200 square feet. And this is actually fairly typical within subdivisions that are planned out. You have smaller lot sizes just so that because you are able to design things rather than having a pre-platted area that you only have, this is your box you have to work with. The setbacks will be a little bit reduced. We've kind of worked with them on making sure that one of the main gripes that you have with some residential communities that are planned out is you don't have enough of a setback between either the garage or the front door with the driveway, and you potentially have trucks, with their bumpers hanging over sidewalks, and it creates, if you want to have a walkable community, but then you've got trucks or other larger vehicles that are blocking the sidewalk, it kind of takes away from that. We have worked with the applicant to make sure that we have enough room with those setbacks to ensure that if parked properly, and I can't speak that everyone will park their truck in the proper way, but if parked properly, we shouldn't have any issues where pedestrian access is, where you're making people walk around the trucks with their bumpers out into the sidewalk area. So
Before you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but before you leave this particular slide, for the benefit of the public attending today, could you explain the numbers that are in the parentheses under commercial and under the residential, please?
So the first number, if we're looking at, it talks about for commercial, it's the maximum number of habitable floors. So the commercial buildings could go up to 3 stories with that. However, with a hotel, you don't find a lot of hotels, well, you do find some, but most want to go above those 3 stories. So we added a note. That was one of the notes that says the hotel use can go up to 8 habitable floors. The other notes here with some of the front setbacks, it states that the 0-foot setback applies to the internal shared lot line. So it's just a matter of how we would measure where the house can begin from the property line. Note 2 is a 23-foot minimum setback to the sidewalk. That's what we had discussed in making sure that you have a clear walking path to the sidewalk so you don't have vehicles hanging out into there. The 4th note is relating to one of the uses that is listed. The indoor boat storage lot coverage may be increased to 65%. That's within note 4, which is in the RV boat storage area. Staff is fine with that. And then the last note is that the 0 lot line is a dwelling unit owned in fee simple and not individual lot. It's mostly just a clarification of what that use states. We don't have 0 lot lines specifically stated within our land development code, so this was a note that would indicate, kind of what that development style would be.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And then there's a red dot, or is that just something on this?
I think that was just something with the PowerPoint. So ignore that red dot on your screen. So the next thing we're going to discuss is the roadway design, and the applicant kind of mentioned this previously. There's a couple of different roadway designs that they're proposing. The neighborhood road section, you're going to have around a 40-foot wide right-of-way, And one thing that staff wanted in the beginning, and the applicant was willing to give this, is that within those neighborhood roads, we wanted to have sidewalks on both sides, and then the applicant has provided that within that, so staff was very appreciative of that. The next is your spine and commercial road section. You also have sidewalks on both sides of that. You also have areas for bike lanes, for travel lanes, and that would be between a 60 and 120 foot wide right-of-way. So staff appreciates the sidewalks being provided on both sides of those road sections. The next we have is the landscaping and open space plan. We have the buffer table in front of you, and then the colors kind of indicate what those buffers are. And of course, the hearing examiner and also city council can obviously in the future decide to, hearing examiner can make a recommendation to increase any buffers or add any sort of canopy, trees, shrubs, or anything at your will. And then also city council has the authority to approve any increase in size or scope of those buffers. So we have the 5 buffer types. The most intense buffer is the buffer type 2, which is a 30-foot width with the shrubs and the canopies, and that was done in order to provide the buffering between the commercial mixed use from the sanctuary estates.
And could you go through this a little slower? I appreciate that you have your own speed of presentation, but this was a significant issue for public comment. And so if we can dig into this issue a little bit more, I'd really appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you.
You want me to focus particularly on the buffer 2, which was mentioned by some of the public comment?
I think that'd be a good idea. But,
Okay, so
but
buffer
also do a sort of a general review of the other ones, but yeah, the buffer 2 would be appreciated. Thank you.
So buffer type 1 is the buffer width along Burnt Store Road, and this is kind of a general commercial buffer that we apply to most other zoning districts and commercial developments. It's got a 25-foot width between the development and the right-of-way, and then within that you have your sort of rate of tree spacing or provision. So you're looking at 5 canopy trees and 33 shrubs per 100 linear feet of the roadway. So that would be the number of trees and shrubs you have per 100 feet. And then there's some additional, they kind of mention how many trees and shrubs will be planted within that buffer. So you're looking for that buffer type 1 along Burnt Store Road, you're going to have almost 200 canopy trees and then around 1,300 shrubs that are provided within that strip of land along Burnt Store Road. Buffer type 2, which is the one that has generated some discussion with the nearby residents, is once again, we go by linear feet. It's got around 2,500 linear feet of buffer that goes between the commercial and the mixed-use components of the PUD. And then the width on that is 30 feet between the development. And then the rate of tree provision per 100 linear feet is 5 canopy trees, 5 accent trees, and then 66 shrubs. So in total, what you would get out of that buffer is 129 canopy trees, 129 accent trees, and then 1,700 shrubs. And we do have some provisions within our conditions about the size of planting of those shrubs and then their maintaining height as well.
Would that buffer address the light intrusion that was mentioned in public comment or no?
The buffering, not so much, but we do have a condition regarding light intrusion within our, at the end of the presentation, you'll see the conditions that we have regarding lighting.
Understood, thank you.
The next buffer, these buffers are admittedly smaller because they don't have a lot of, the next 3 buffers are smaller and require less trees, generally because the surrounding development or potential development is either commercial, such as the area along buffer 5, or you have basically single family and residential development up to single family development as well. Within the land development code, we don't require any buffering between single family development. It's single family like style uses. For this though, we did recommend that there would be some buffering just because you have a different style community. Maybe have like a nice vegetated line of demarcation between the development and the platted lots. And then the green buffer that you have here, it's a smaller buffer as well. But the reason for that is along Wilmington Parkway, while we indicate that it's got frontage on Wilmington Parkway, there's actually a canal that separates that street and the development. So there's even more separation between there. So the buffer gets a little bit smaller. You're looking at about a 5-foot width, and then some canopy trees and shrubs being planted in there. Okay, access and transportation. We mentioned previously that access is proposed from 4 streets: Burnt Store Road, Chiquita Boulevard, Jacaranda Parkway, Wilmington Parkway. The number of entrances from Burnt Store Road is undetermined. The applicant mentioned that they have 4 that are guaranteed from Lee County, with the 5th, we'll see how it goes. Per the TIS that was provided, the project will produce almost 4,000 AM peak hour trips and almost 6,000 PM peak hour trips. There was a traffic impact study that was conducted. The project was not shown to have major impacts to the roadway system, primarily due to the low level of existing development in the area, and then the density of the zoning that is currently in place, which is mostly single-family zoning. That TIS showed that there was no offsite improvements required, and then the Chiquita Boulevard entrance will be built upon a certain number of units. I have here, it was the 501st. I think the applicant said it was 600. So it's, per the master concept plan, it is 601st unit. So ignore that number in my...
Before we leave this slide, from a planning perspective, do you have a concern about limiting the number of entrances from Burnt Store Road and spreading that traffic out to roads to the south?
There's not... Well, there's two kind of parts to this. First of all, Burnt Store Road is a Lee County maintained road. So City of Cape Coral and planning staff really has no ability or jurisdiction to state, how many access points do you get, don't get. We do have control over the master concept plan and showing where they have that. But, it's difficult to say, a project this size obviously requires a certain number of access points, not only just for ease of the people that are using it, but also for things like police, fire. They need their access and their ingress as well, so they can get in and service different areas of the site. The second component to that is there really isn't a lot of other areas where they can go to get access. The majority of the homes are going to be within that interior portion, and you're either coming from Burnt Store Road or you're coming from where the other ones are. And from a planning perspective, if you have more of your entrances from the higher volume road, that makes more sense than it does than having entrances from single family neighborhoods.
I understand the jurisdictional question. The reason I'm asking you what I'm asking you is, from a planning perspective, if Burnt Store Road is intended as a limited access road, having 4 or potentially 5 egresses or ingresses from this development or into this development, wouldn't that affect its characteristic as a limited access road? I'm thinking of Summerlin Road. I don't know if you've been here a long time, I think, and there's been a lot of discussion about how Summerlin Road was originally intended as a limited access road, and then as development occurred, there were more and more accesses put on Summerlin Road, and there's some folks that think that affected its limited access potential. So I understand the weighing test that we're talking about here, but I do respect your credentials as an expert in this area, and setting aside the jurisdictional issue, which I'm clearly aware of, from an expert planning perspective, I think that's what I would be very interested in your comments.
Yeah, so to go along with and I'm not a transportation engineer, but my assumption is that with Lee County and their Department of Transportation, they probably have, a linear feet equation that goes along with that. So in their mind, you've got so much linear feet along Burnt Store Road, you need to have several accesses into that, and you wouldn't want to have just one access for whatever that linear frontage along Burnt Store Road is. Could it be done different ways? Could they throw a frontage road in there? Probably. But if they feel that there has been, if they feel that they're not slowing down the traffic enough with, having those 4 access points and maybe a 5th in the future, then, from a planner's perspective, we would generally tend to agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
So the next part of this is the utilities. We've mentioned previously that there are no utilities currently available to the site as part of the city, water, sewer, irrigation system. And then the site is not planned to be part of the utility expansion program for several years. The site is currently within the urban service reserve area. The level of development obviously requires water and sewer, given that you're talking about several thousand homes and several thousand square feet of commercial and office space. It was mentioned that the applicant is proposing, and we have come to an agreement for the offsite utility agreement between the applicant and staff. That offsite utility agreement, we have had discussions, and we will run that concurrently with the Hudson Creek mixed-use planned unit development, so that we don't. Yeah, I think the utility agreement was generally approved between staff and the applicant a couple of weeks ago. Staff didn't find that it might be in the best interest if you do not have a utility agreement where you don't know what the development is going to be exactly. So we think it'll be best to be run concurrently with City Council. The approval of that agreement will be required prior to any development within the site in terms of the building, the single-family homes. There's some discussion between the applicant and staff as to when shovel could go into the ground based on the utility agreement. And I know this was discussed previously. The site will also need an amendment to place the site in the urban service transition area. So the comprehensive plan allows for, well, you don't have utilities that are there to the site. The comprehensive plan does have some allowance that if the developer is providing utilities of their own accord to any area within the city of Cape Coral, then we can do a amendment to place this in the urban service transition area. We would probably want this to be privately initiated, even though we have never, to my knowledge, had a privately initiated urban service boundary change. So this would need to be done after the utility agreement is approved by City Council.
If council were not to approve the comprehensive plan change, would that not affect what we're doing here today or what the council would be doing down the road? And I'm seeing the city attorney.
Yes, that would affect.
Yeah.
If the John Niclario, City Attorney's Office. I understand the agreement was internally approved with staff in our office and the developer. It's concurrent going on the agenda with the rezoning. If this comp plan, there would be an issue, and I'll let Russell respond to that, but there would be an issue. They need to get the comp plan consistent.
Yeah, we have a cap on the level of development that you can have occur within the urban service reserve area, and that's generally limited to flows that are equal to about a single-family home. With this, obviously, you're going to generate much more than what a single-family home would generate, so you do need to have that boundary changed within our comprehensive plan.
But my concern is, if this were to go forward as is, I'm not saying it will, to council, how does that juxtaposition work if council approves something that ultimately was inconsistent with the comp plan? It couldn't do that.
We have in the past approved rezonings, this is a rezoning, contingent on the subsequent comp plan. It's necessary.
I understand that, but there's so many moving parts here. What I'm thinking is, I mean, I know we've done the contingencies before, but those were fairly straightforward projects up and down. Maybe I'm worried about something.
I mean, and that's also part of the condition. One of our conditions is that prior to any development, they have to have that future land use amendment done, and that's kind of the protection. I see where you're saying. I mean, perhaps in a more perfect world, could you have had your utility agreement, your boundary change, and then your PUD done? But that also throws into consideration they're approving a utility agreement for a project that they don't really know what it is. So there's some give and take. The staff thought that the best way to do this was to condition the development upon future approval, so that to ensure that took place.
Okay.
Your Honor, if I may, condition number 3, and I believe was accepted, I believe, by the developers. It does provide that no building permit shall be issued until a future land use map amendment is approved that amends the urban services designation of the site from reserve to transition, so that is a condition.
I understand that, but my concern is, were that not to go forward, were the contingency not to be fulfilled, would they have to go back to square one, or square 1.5? That's a risk, I suppose.
That's a risk sounds like they're willing to take. I mean,
Mr.
Russell, do you want to respond to?
Mr.
Yeah.
Schropp is a frequent flyer in halls of these types, so I know he's going to wait his turn to respond to that. Thank you.
I mean, the alternative to that is you just go and you build the utilities, and then staff would.
Best.
What's that?
And hope for the best.
Well, you build the utilities, and then by provision of the comprehensive plan, I mean, the city council also does not want to be in violation of their comprehensive plan. So you could build your utilities, and then you would almost be obligated to have that boundary change because you do have utilities that are in place and available to the development.
Can you foresee a scenario, and I know I'm jumping ahead and I apologize, where the developer would put in a septic system under, there's so many shifting pieces here.
I mean, it's possible, but also Florida statute limits your size of site to 20,000 square feet, a minimum 20,000 square feet if you're on a septic. So, I mean, could they come in and do a subdivision plat and plat everything at 20,000 square feet, build septic systems? I suppose it's possible. Obviously, it's not within, they didn't purchase this property to build 20,000 square foot lots with septic systems.
Well,
So
I think market forces would address that, I think is what you're saying.
I mean, yeah, potentially. I mean, it gets speculative at this point. But the alternative, if you don't have utilities, the commercial is off the table because you can't obviously build. We really don't allow for on-site package plants anymore. That's gone the way of the buffalo.
I think that was an excellent set aside by the way.
Yeah. So I mean, and the alternative is you have 20,000 square foot lots with septic system, and I mean, I don't think that that's really what they're looking to do here. Obviously, by their the plan unit development request.
Okay, thank you.
So next, we'll go into the rezoning. We kind of touched on this previously. The mixed-use plan unit development zoning, in line with the comprehensive plan, allows for a maximum of 25 dwelling units per acre within the areas of the development that have the single-family residential land use classification. And then the overall maximum floor area ratio is 1.0. Floor area ratio is obviously the size of the building can be the size of the parcel. So generally, if you're going to go to that FAR of 1.0, which is not typically done within Cape Coral, you're talking about a vertical development of that fashion. And I won't go through the master concept plan request. We've already been over that. This next thing we'll go into is the proposed schedule of uses. The applicant has requested in the beginning numerous uses within the residential, commercial, and mixed-use areas. We mentioned that there was a back and forth between staff and the applicant. We've reviewed those uses. The single-family uses are generally, single-family style developments. There's also some accessory-style uses, such as like the community, essential service facilities, model homes, things like that. We reviewed all the uses. We recommend the schedule of uses contained within the staff report. For brevity's sake, I'm choosing to include those schedule of uses just as I mentioned. They're within the staff report. There's a lot of them. To go through them would be time-consuming and also quite repetitive because you have the commercial, the mixed use have some similarity in uses, and then the single-family and the multifamily areas also have a lot of similarity in uses. So we're just choosing to indicate that they're within the staff report as part of the conditions, and that's how we'd like to go forward with that.
That's fine. I don't believe we're going to continue, or we will conclude today in any event, but I agree with your analysis of that. Go ahead.
Okay. So now we'll go into the analysis portion of the MXPUD. The first standard is whether the proposed zoning district is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. Staff finds that the MXPUD is consistent with the land use classifications of single-family residential, single-family, multifamily residential, and commercial. Kind of a different note, because you do have the open space designation within this, and the PUD would cover those open space areas. We don't allow PUDs for open space, generally because PUDs usually indicate development of some type, but because those open space areas will not be developed upon, staff finds that it's sort of a It doesn't really affect that comp plan requirement of not having a PUD approved for open space. For a different development, if you were doing a PUD on open space and you're proposing development, obviously that would be inconsistent. With this, we don't find there's any consistency issues given that there's no development that's being proposed within the open space designation. The next standard is whether the range of uses in the proposed district will be compatible with existing uses in the area under consideration. Existing uses surrounding the site include mostly single-family homes to the south, to the west, and then you do have them to the north as well within unincorporated Lee County. Most of the area to the north is preservation land. The majority of the residential uses and development within the PUD will occur near the existing homes. And then the commercial and mixed-use development will occur near Burnt Store Road, where there's mostly undeveloped land at this time, or the land use and the zoning is commercial or mixed use. So you'd have some compatibility between those uses and that future development. The third standard is whether the range of uses allowed in the proposed zone district will be compatible with existing and potential uses in the area under consideration. Potential uses for the non-Burnt Store Road area, which is the middle residential area and the multifamily area, it's limited to mostly single-family homes based on current zoning. You have R1 that's mostly around those areas. The Burnt Store Road area is near areas with commercial zoning, and then the commercial and mixed-use areas within the PUD can be compatible with those. And we've actually had several land use amendments that have been done. Burnt Store Road is kind of envisioned as a commercial corridor. In the future, you have lots of large land area parcels between 10 to 20, 30 acres. And really that's going to be intended as a commercial area, and staff finds that with the commercial and the mixed use being oriented towards Burnt Store Road, it kind of goes in line with the vision for what Burnt Store Road is going to be in the future. The fourth standard is whether the proposed district will serve a community need or broader public purpose. The City of Cape Coral has a documented need for both multifamily and commercial development, and the MXPD will provide large numbers of those both. You'll add a maximum of 1,000 multifamily units and then several 100,000 square feet of commercial space. So staff finds that it will.
You said several 100,000. You mean several thousand?
Well, we have 400,000 square feet of commercial space proposed.
Okay,
So.
well, I was just reading your.
I got you. Yeah,
PowerPoint.
I'm reading.
It's
I'm
okay.
going off the cuff.
You don't have to hurry. We're not going to conclude today, Mr. Boyko.
I know.
It's already almost 10 of.
So we find that the PUD will help to address that need for multifamily and commercial square footage. The fifth standard is the characteristics of the rezone area are suitable for the uses permitted in the proposed district. Staff finds that the site has frontage on an arterial roadway, Burnt Store Road, and then 3 collector roads, Jacaranda, the Chiquita North, and then Wilmington Parkway. We mentioned that the off-site utility agreement is being finalized and hopefully will be approved by council in the future. The site is large and has adequate depth to help provide the open space and the buffering that you would look for with non-residential and multifamily development. The site is separated from the single-family homes within Cape Coral by existing roadways. As we mentioned earlier, buffering is proposed. I believe the only homes that are not separated by roadways are the ones that are within sanctuary estates. And given makes kind of sense, seeing those are unincorporated Lee County, and this is a City of Cape Coral parcel, so there wasn't any sort of cohesion and development at that time. And then staff also finds that the requested density and intensity are appropriate based on the location, area, orientation of the site, and the project design. And then the sixth standard is whether a zoning district other than the district requested will create fewer potential adverse impacts to uses in the surrounding area. And staff does find that with the PUD, you're probably looking at fewer adverse impacts based upon the fact that you can help with, you can tailor the uses, the buffering, where things are located and how things are designed within the PUD. It does allow for more landscaping, more open space. The PUDs have a requirement of a minimum of 30% open space for development. With commercial, you don't have a strict open space requirement that is required. although you do have landscaping that provides for open space. The Hudson Creek PUD, I believe, is providing around 60% open space throughout the PUD when you account for those open space and preservation areas that they've outlined. It does allow for the provision of amenities, which are not required for either the R1, RML, or RMM districts. It allows for the provision of sidewalks. As we mentioned earlier, there was that discussion between the applicant and staff where the applicant provided sidewalks along those roadways, and then also allows for conditioning of commercial uses and scrutiny of what staff finds are appropriate uses for the development. Also, we have our consistency with the comprehensive plan. The first is the housing element, policy 1.2, which encourages a mix of housing types at a variety of densities. And then policy 2.1, which helps the city, will assist in lowering costs for residential development in whatever ways we can, perhaps by providing more density when appropriate. Then the next policies are all from the future land use element. You have policy 1.6, 1.7, 1.15, 4.1, 8.4, 8.5, and those generally refer to where the location of commercial is, promoting that diverse housing stock, and then also encouraging transition from more intensive to less intensive uses. The next is the public school facilities element, policy 2.1. Within the Novus packet, it was provided that the Lee County School District has indicated that they have capacity for the potential students that will be generated or that will move into the area. The last is the transportation element, 2.15, 2.11, generally referring to how the city wants to promote sidewalk networks and wants to include those when appropriate within development. And then we also reviewed this per the PUD standards and criteria within the Land Development Code. The first is that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, and we have indicated that previously. Second, uses and densities. These are established within the PUD and in the master concept plan. Dimensional standards as well are established within the master concept plan. Open space, minimum 25% within a PUD, and Hudson Creek will provide 50% open space. Perimeter buffers, we've shown previously that there are buffers being proposed on most sides of the property, and they increase where staff finds it's appropriate based on the surrounding development. Street standards, we've looked at the design. We do have the condition regarding asking for any homes that are on the spine road have a circular driveway, and that is going to be the sticky point of conditioning between staff and the applicant. And then lastly, the last standard is the phasing. The applicant proposes multiple phases. The residential is likely to start before the commercial, but it does allow for provision of both to start at the same time. So our recommendation is approval of the PUD with the conditions that are outlined in the staff report, and I have all of those. And I don't know if I might be able to get through them before time's up.
I think we should, I don't want to start the conditions at this time.
Okay.
I'll
And then
explain
we've had one phone call of inquiry that made it onto this one. There was another one that was just an informational phone call. The one phone call, and he was here speaking previously. He also submitted a letter regarding this, is the access for that property that is located to the east of the development. I'm still kind of trying to work with the applicant and seeing if he has some sort of deeded easement language that states that he has access to the property. Outside of that, we can discuss that we can discuss that further at the next hearing in regards to how that individual could obtain access to his property in the future.
Thank you, I appreciate, and I concur with the applicant's comments about your staff report. It was very well put together, and well, I don't agree with all the analysis, but I think the analysis was very well done. Thank you. Thanks. Good job. All right, Mr. Schropp, we come to a turning point here. We have 8 minutes left. I saw you taking copious notes during public comment and also during my comments. Obviously, I would prefer starting fresh on the conditions in the next hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your thought as well?
That's fine. Right. And I think it would be appropriate if staff could go through them, and then we could discuss, and then after staff goes through their conditions, we can discuss the ones that we would suggest some changes to. And so that's fine. if it would be acceptable, I would like to address the utility issues that came up with regard to the various moving parts here.
The next 7 minutes are yours. I would add one comment. Since we are going to be continuing this, and not yet, obviously, but I would urge the applicant to meet with the residents of this area of concern. I get the impression that that might not have happened. And as staff knows, I am a big proponent of those kind of meetings. I can't order it, but I'd be very happy if you would do that.
Thank you, and we'll be happy to do that. We have been discussing in the back of the room some ways to address some of the concerns that were expressed here today. So,
and if some combination of your staff of your your team can meet with them, and report back at the next.
Yes,
hearing.
and if one or both of or all of you could stick around, and we'll get your contact information.
Oh, I don't think that's going to be a problem.
I'm not getting out of the room, right?
Go ahead, Mr. Schrock.
Okay, so just simply on the, well, not so simply on the utility issues and the utility agreement. Yes, there are a lot of moving parts here, and the question is which comes first and how do we proceed in order to accomplish all of the things that need to be accomplished here. And staff is correct, Mr. Boyko is correct that, you know, didn't make sense to us or to staff to go through and do a development agreement or a utility agreement when we didn't know exactly what was going to be approved in terms of the parameters. And so we needed to get the PUD done, but there's also the comp plan issue, which we also knew was out there. But the way I read that comp plan provision, and I think the way it's kind of interpreted, is you can't amend the comp plan until you've got a development agreement that provides for the extension of utilities. So the most appropriate way that we felt to address it was through the conditions in the zoning, and trying to walk lockstep to City Council with the PUD and the sewer and water agreement, the utilities agreement. And so when they get to the City Council together, they see the whole picture. They have your recommendation on the PUD. They have the recommendation of the city attorney and staff on the development agreement, and can approve both at the same time if they are inclined to do so. Now, the issue is the comp plan amendment and following after it. I think your concern is, well, what happens if they don't move forward with the comp plan amendment? Well, we're going to initiate that upon completion of the development agreement. And hopefully it'll move relatively quickly through the process since everything has been seen already before. Look, I recognize the legislative discretion that City Council has in terms of comp plan amendments and all things planning and zoning wise. And so there's nothing that compels them at the end of the day to approve the plan amendment. However, with the development agreement in place, the PUD in place, subject to the comp plan amendment, I think that's probably the best we're going to be able to do in order to provide the documentation that, in Chapter 163 terms, the data and analysis necessary to support the plan amendment. And frankly, I don't know that there would be any contrary data and analysis at that point.
Where are we going? I'm sorry, go ahead.
If it was not to be approved for whatever reason, yes, we would have to come back and revisit how we're dealing with sewer and water. I don't believe 20,000 square foot lots would be a viable alternative, but we'll address that if we come to it. And, you know, I think in the context of the overall process, this would appear to me to be the best process to follow.
Well, where I was going with that was, and I know we don't generally do this, but does it make sense to have some contingent conditions that would only be fulfilled if it's not approved, or is this overthinking the whole process, do you think?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, and we can think about that in the interim between now and the next hearing as to whether there would be appropriate to do that. Frankly, the conditions address the situation of this needs to occur before building permits are issued.
I understand,
for the
but
site. But if it doesn't, then do we have contingent conditions? It's a topic for us, I think, to discuss with staff in the interim between the hearings.
I don't think there's a legal impediment to alternate conditions. It's just, it may be hoops that are not necessary from your perspective to jump through. I just would hate to have, there is an economic breaking point at some point in this process.
Yes.
And I hope we don't reach it, obviously.
Yes.
Okay, in our remaining 2 minutes, could I'm going to ask you your opinion. I've checked with staff earlier before the hearing started regarding how full the upcoming agendas are, and we have May 10th. It's an unusual time for us. It's 1 p.m. We have May 17th, which is at our normal time of 9 a.m. So either of those, in your discretion, will be fine.
My preference would be, and I haven't discussed this with my client, but my preference would be May 17th because I am likely out of town the week of May the 10th. And David, I apologize, but that's the best I can do.
Okay,
May
Mr.
17th.
Boyko, can you chime in on this one, please? Is May 17th acceptable to you?
Either date would be fine for staff.
You're here, I get that.
We're here, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know what other commitments you had in the interim, thank you. All right, recognizing your client is not thrilled with this perspective, May 17th, 2022. Before I announce that, though, I do want to say one more thing. I want to address this to the members of the public. I know that you have provided testimony today. Obviously, the applicant is taking your testimony very seriously because it's going to be, they will incur a cost meeting with you, which is their burden to bear. But I do want to add one other thing, which is if you or other people choose to come to the next hearing, which I'm going to announce in a minute, you will have an opportunity to testify at that time as well. Our process does allow for that. Other jurisdictions don't, but we certainly do. And if there's going to be a change in some of the conditions, obviously, we would we would want to hear your perspective on that as well. So, any final comments, Mr. Schrock?
Not at this time.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Boyko, any final comments?
None.
Okay, fine. So it's 12 o'clock. This hearing is being continued to May 17th, 2022, commencing at 9 a.m. to be heard as part of the regular agenda on that date. And we stand concluded. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.